I don't know why that music has gone so weird. Let me just start and trying to figure out what's happened. Got a problem. Give me 1 sec here. I'm going to kill every single tab. Okay, are we good? Excellent, we're good. Okay, the tab has been found. The tab has been exterminated. I apologize that intro music was even worse than normal. There was a second tab that was playing it like, I don't know, 10 seconds later, and it was bad, and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and it took me a little while. Hello! And welcome to a Christmas special slow chat. Hopefully that's not a harbinger of how everything's going to go tonight. I actually think tonight's going to be amazing fun. I am, of course, speaking with the one and only Graham Hood. You know him as Hoody. I know him as an absolute legend and one of the people that I absolutely respect and look up to. And can I be honest with you? There are some silver linings to the last couple of years. Yes, it's been horrible, and I'm not trying to diminish that at all, but there's been some silver linings. And without what happened over the last couple of years, I would not know this man. And I think that'd be a crying shame. So I'm very, very glad to be welcoming Graham Hood on tonight. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Graham Hood. How are you, Hoodie?
All the better for talking to you, Topher.
Oh, shucks, mate. I feel the same.
Now I've got to ask you a question. I've got to actually put a proposal to you before we start.
I'm already married. If you're going to propose that,
no, I'm prepared to wager that I will beat you again tonight. Think about it, because the last time we did this, the last time we did a slow chat, everyone said, "Oh, Topher, you'll fall asleep before Topher does."
It's true. That's true, actually, and I did. I piked out. So what I didn't tell you when I invited you onto a Christmas slow chat is that we actually now have to keep this going all the way until Christmas. So that's 78 hours. You and I, first one to fall asleep loses. So
you're going to fall asleep because you've got a new baby in the house, mate. You are. I'm going to win this. Laid down.
You're absolutely correct, because I'm in a state at the moment where if I sat on a comfy couch, it would be less than 5 minutes and I would be gone. I would just be out. So for those that don't know, I've just had a new baby. Well, my wife just had the baby, but we had the baby. And newborn babies are a lot of work, and they don't like to sleep all the way through the night. Newsflash for those of you that don't know. And so what we did was we went into the in-laws' house, which seemed like a great idea at the time because the in-laws were going to help look after the older two kids who are 6 and 2 years old. So we could sleep in the morning and have nice relaxed mornings and, recover a little bit and not end up too exhausted. Well, lo and behold, someone in the house gets COVID and then passes it on to everyone else in the house. And so I, as the healthy one, and my wife as well, like none of the unjabbed people have gotten it, by the way. But
I won't tell a soul.
Every single person that's been vaccinated against COVID-19, which is 5 different people, 3 of which are under 30, all of them have got it. And I'm playing nursemaid to the whole lot of them. Bringing them, they're all self-isolating in their rooms. I'm bringing them trays of food and then getting up to my kid at 4 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the morning, and whenever she wakes up wanting a feed. So I am burning the candle at both ends, and boy, oh boy, am I tired. Anyway, you didn't come here to hear me whinge. However, there are some people asking to see photos. Congrats on the new baby, etc. Anyway, someone's asking to see photos. So here you go. Here's some photos. I just grabbed a collection of a couple of photos, knowing that, hey, it's Christmas time and I'm proud of my family. I've just added to my family, so I want to share this with you. The little red and blue thing you see in that photo is my son Winston, who's a couple of meters up a pine tree. He's just hit the climbing phase and he is loving it. Excuse me. Now
that looks more than a couple of meters up.
It's a good probably 3 meters or so. Yeah, if I was standing there, I'd be well shorter than him, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That there is Florence Field, and she is a ranger. Now, this is the first ranger in the family for about 2 generations. We've got them on both sides of the family, just not in my parents' generation and not in my generation. But it's come back out in this generation. So there you go, Florence Field, blue-eyed, red-haired. Not that she's showing us her eyes there. This is Chloe. We went to a church service the other day, and this is my 2-year-old. And they had this nice little setup in the church. And I was, you know what, sit on the couch, we'll take a photo, just on the phone. And that came up nice. This is her. So we went to a petting zoo, and it was really lovely, actually. We showed up at the petting zoo, and the person who ran it just instantly goes, Topher Field, as soon as he saw me. I was like, oh, what have I done? But no, he's familiar with what I do. And he said something really nice. He said that actually it was watching a lot of my work over the last couple of years that inspired him to actually just take the plunge and start the petting zoo, because he didn't want to. The mandates were coming in and didn't want to do it, but he had to find another way of earning money. And this is what he did, was the petting zoo. We made some real progress here with Chloe, because when we walked in, she was pointing at every four-legged creature and calling it a cow. Every four-legged creature was a cow. Didn't matter how big or how small. If it had 4 legs, it was a cow. Cow, cow, cow. But we made progress. Because by the time we left, she was absolutely convinced that this sheep that she's got her hands on here was, in fact, a dog. So that's some sort of progress. Not quite sure what sort of progress. That's my son Winston, 6 years old, with Florence, and he is absolutely besotted. It's the cutest thing. Both of them, Winston and Chloe, absolutely love Florence, and it's just the loveliest thing to see happening, especially at this time of year. Makes it all the more meaningful. This is Chloe back at the petting zoo with another one of the cows. So you got up close and personal with the cows. This was just a nice moment. This is my wife. She's post surgery. Please don't. I think she looks lovely, but she's not looking at her best. Let's just say. So please don't judge her for that. But she's post surgery due to complications. We've had to have C-sections with each of the kids. It's just how it is. But there's Winston holding Florence and having a good chat with Edwina. And on the left, you can see what looks like. Hoody, have you come across the website Bad Taxidermy?
No, but what I'm looking at looks like a stuffed toy.
It looks like a stuffed toy. So there's a website, I think it's badtaxidermy.com or something like that, where animals that have been taxidermied, and they just look horrific. They look like demons, or they look just comical. They're just the proportions, like they just look like they've been done wrong. I swear that Emmett here, his elbows look fake. That's not how a dog's legs work. I'm sure of it, and yet there it is. So I assure you, the dog is real. And for those of you that wanted to see Emmett post haircut, I apologize that I haven't put up a picture, but there you go. That's Emmett post haircut. So that's been my life for the last couple of weeks, is just dealing with all of that.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with that. And in celebration of a new baby and getting to spend some time with you, Graham, I'm enjoying some bubblies. Now, I know you don't drink alcohol, so I won't be offended. But what have you got there?
I'm having a cuppa.
Cup of tea?
No, it's some kind of chai thing, but it's very nice.
Okay, very good, very good. So you've been busy as well, though. I've been busy with family stuff, but I've been kind of watching from afar. I haven't been able to sort of follow your movements closely, but you've been quite busy you've been traveling around or something. What's been going on there?
Yeah, we've done 30,000 kilometers this year touring the country.
Yeah, wow.
We decided that we were going to run the border in Western Australia before McGowan opened it.
Right.
Because 3 years without seeing the kids and grandkids over there was a bit too much. And we thought, we're just going to go and take our chances. If I get arrested going across the border, then so be it. I'm going to take this on, Yeah,
it's a story in itself.
Yeah. So we headed off with the caravan heading for WA, and we thought we'll be away about a month, 5 weeks. And of course, we're on Facebook along the way, just sort of propping people up as we were going and trying to keep everyone's hopes up. And we got to the border. Everyone knew we were getting to the border, and they said, let us know if you get through. And we drove up to the border, and there were no cops there.
Yeah.
And we did the fruit fly inspection thing or whatever it is, the quarantine thing, and the guy took a lettuce and a bunch of grapes, and then he said, you can go. So basically we went through. And as we got into WA, we said on a Facebook Live, we made it. Everyone cheered, da-da-da. And somebody at Coolgardie, somebody from Kalgoorlie said, "Oh, look, if you'll be coming through Coolgardie on your way to Perth, stop at Anzac Park on your way through, and we'll have a thermos of coffee, and we'll have a cup of coffee with you and a bicky." And we thought that'd be lovely. Meet this couple. They were going to drive from Kalgoorlie to Coolgardie to do that. And when we pulled up opposite Anzac Park in Coolgardie, there were about 50 people there, all from Kalgoorlie with banners, and we thought, wow. And we had a wonderful hour and a half or two with them. And then the next day we were in a little town called Dalwallinu, and it was Anzac Day the next day. And we went to visit Michelle's sister, and we thought we'll go to the Anzac dawn service. And we said on our live, we're in Dalwallinu, we're going to go to the dawn service tomorrow, and then we're going to start heading for Perth. And we get to the dawn service at Dalwallinu, and the RSL president who was doing the service seemed quite overawed. He was somewhat stage struck. He was quite nervous, and he did a great job. And it wasn't until afterwards that I realised that when the service was finished, all these people flocked up to get a hug from us.
Yeah.
Some of them had driven 5 hours to be at the dawn service with us in Dalwallinu. And even the RSL president came up and he said, "Oh, Captain Hood, it's so good to have you here." And he was a follower. And he said, "We haven't had a crowd this big since whenever." And then before we knew it, we found ourselves, I was going to one of the rallies in Perth, which I was intending to do anyway. And then before we knew it, we were being invited to all these town hall meetings. And
that's amazing.
What was going to be a 4 or 5 week trip ended up being 14 weeks in the first instance. And we stopped at, I don't know how many towns, but every place along the way. And we spoke to thousands of people. And
amazing.
What was great about it, Topher, and that's why I love doing these tours. We've done a second one since, but we would turn up at a town without notice, virtually, with 24 hours notice. And the organizer had contacted us on Facebook or something and say, "Look, we've got 20 people at a stand in the park who'd love to meet with you." And so with 24 hours notice, they'd organise to have a gathering, and we'd turn up and there'd be 300 there. So what was really good about that was all these 300 people are all looking at each other like, "Far out, I didn't know you thought the same way I did." So when we left, the stand in the park went from 25 to 300.
Yeah.
So we could see the benefit, and we came to meet some astounding people. My faith in the spirit of Australia has been restored on this tour, and
wonderful.
And we got home having visited everywhere pretty much, and we had about 6 weeks at home to get everything organised because we've got a little farm, and it had fallen into a little bit of need of repair. And then we were begged to come to Queensland, and we hit the road, and we did. I did 49 2-hour speeches in 37 days on a tour that encompassed the whole of Queensland.
Yeah, right.
So it was. It was just beautiful, and all we needed was a flat tire, and the whole schedule would have fallen over. God was great; He guided us through the way. We had a cracked windscreen; we got that fixed by a miracle. But everything I've been doing on these tours, Topher, the main thing is I've been using it to call out the men, to bring men back to a place where they can fill the breach. Men of honour, men of integrity, men who live into a new brand of hero, not the mainstream media brand of hero. Yeah. Rest in peace to Shane Warne, but Shane Warne was held up as a hero, and a lot of our young men have been shown by our adoration of people like Shane that if you want to be an Australian hero, you have to be a good sportsman, get laid often, and handle your grog.
Yeah.
And to my way of thinking, a real hero is somebody who works a menial job for 30 years that he hates, but comes home every day with a smile on his face because he knows in his heart he's feeding his kids and educating them. That's a hero. And when we can all fit into that mold.
Yeah.
So we've got to create this environment where men can come back into their manhood in a beautiful way and in a strength that gives women and children peace and serenity, because they know that they can flourish in a safe environment. Because men were always meant to be hunters and gatherers and protectors, and women were always meant to be mothers and nurturers, and we all do those things well when we're mentored into them.
Yeah.
And we've got to come back to that. And if we do that, we restore the family unit. We bring men back into their rightful place. We restore the family unit. We lower the male suicide rate. We lower the single parent family rate. We lower the domestic violence rate, and we actually participate in healthy community, and that's what we're all meant to do. So I love the tours for that. It's been brilliant.
I've been saying for years that time spent building community is never wasted. Yeah. Doesn't matter what happens in the future, what comes our way. Time spent building community is never ever wasted. I've had a really restoring experience, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. Thanks to Battleground Melbourne. So Battleground Melbourne, for anyone that doesn't know, is a documentary that I directed, but was really written by the people of Melbourne and the people of Victoria. They wrote that story over the 2 years of lockdowns as Melbourne became the most lockdown city in the world. I had the privilege of telling that story in a feature-length documentary. It's now won 14 awards around the world, and it's just gotten its first awards from within Australia just a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So finally, we've sort of cracked that nut, because we were winning lots of international awards. They were recognizing it for the story that it told and for what it was, but the Australian arts industry wouldn't touch us. But now we've finally begun to crack the Australian arts industry, which is nice. But prior to the Victorian election, my whole focus was just getting as many people as possible to watch it. So I took it on the road to cinemas. Now it's available to watch for free online. Anyone can do that. But it was really interesting that between half and 2/3 of every crowd were people that had never seen it before, every single time. And I asked, at times I would ask them, I'd say, are you aware that you could have watched this for free? You didn't have to buy a ticket to a cinema. And the answer invariably was, yes, we know. But I didn't want to watch it alone. I wanted to come and watch it with other people. And I just had the incredible privilege of being there for a couple of thousand people as they watched it, many of them for the first time. And then just experiencing that that vibe in the room afterwards, as people are just processing and coming to terms with what they've seen and coming to terms with what they've lived through. There's a couple of really memorable occasions in Shepherd, and a man came up to me and he gave me a hug and he said, "I just want you to know that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." And I said, "Well, I hope you don't mean that literally." And he looked me dead in the eye. He said, "No, I do. That's as literal as it gets."
Yep.
And we shared another hug, and then he's gone. I don't even know his name, right? But just so many beautiful, beautiful moments and similar experiences to what you were describing, where people were looking around the cinema going, "I thought I was alone, but there's another 80 people just from my town here." And just having that experience, it's just the most incredible sequel to 2020, 2021. They sucked. And 2022 is still sucked in a lot of ways, but I think there's so many silver linings that are starting to come through now, where if you just shift your focus away from what's wrong with the world and start looking for what's right, there's a lot to see. There's a lot to draw hope from now, I think.
Look, there is, because I can truly say with hand on heart, Topher, in the last couple of years, I have seen the absolute worst of Australia in my entire life.
Yeah.
But I have also met the most memorable people. I will look back on these last couple of years, and we're not over yet by any means.
No, not at
But
all.
I am so glad that I have walked amongst some of the finest Australians I've ever met. Yeah. And I count many of them my friends. You're one of them. John Larder, Christian Mack, Tony Nikolic. I don't want to go into names because there's a whole lot of people I want to mention. People like Luke Sutton from Drifter Camping and Four Wheel Drive, who's just been, to be honest with you, Michelle and I wouldn't have been able to put bread on the table if it wasn't for people like Luke Sutton. So we're really, we've been blessed, and my faith in the nation has been restored. Because when I made that video in my Qantas uniform, I said that the spirit of Australia had died. And I was brokenhearted about that, but it's been restored. And I thank everybody I've met on this journey, and all those who've contacted me, and all those messages that we get thousands like you do, of people who've actually inadvertently built my faith back in my country. And this has been a journey I'll never forget, and it's by no means over yet. Yeah. I mean, the joy of being able to do 5 nights a week with John Larder, I mean, that is just a joy beyond compare. We are so close. We're better than brothers, So yeah, the whole thing has been a real eye opener in so many ways. I've gone from feeling like I was in the belly of the beast for several weeks in certain locations, to where I feel like if heaven is filled with people like this, man, I can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait to get there. I'm with you on that. Alan Butler's chimed in and said, "Disappointed I can't see last night's show." Now he's referring to your show. I didn't do a show last night. That was a big one, and hope they will repay it. Well, I have some good news for you, Alan. Hoody, how can someone like Alan find your show from last night? Which, by the way, if you don't know what we're talking about and why this is such a significant show, you need to listen carefully, because you need to go and find this and watch it. It's worth it.
Okay, it goes for about an hour 43, Alan, and it's a long watch, but it's well worth watching. It was too hot to go on the normal Facebook page, so we put a link to Rumble on the Facebook page. So if you follow me on Facebook, you can go to that page, and it'll take you to Rumble, to the video on Rumble. My Rumble profile is Royal Australian, as in Royal. Now, why Royal Australian? When I first made that video in September, when was it? Yeah, September 2021. I didn't have a clue about social media, so I sent it to somebody to get it out there, and he built a Rumble profile for me to put it on. And he was a Royal Australian Air Force pilot, ex-Royal Australian Air Force pilot, and he just thought, I'll just call it Royal Australian. So it's Royal Australian at Rumble, and all the videos that we're doing are going up on that. There's a BitChute channel as well. There's Hoody's Heroes Telegram page.
Yep.
So we're trying to get into alternative media, alternative to Facebook. And we've also got a Getter account running now, so you can go to Getter and see it on Getter. But it's definitely, all the videos are up there. They're not going anywhere. And I'll let people in on a clue, because I'm not very technically savvy. We do a Zoom recording of our interviews, and when everybody's happy, I then upload it to the social media platform. So they're always there. You never miss them.
So, guys, if you're not following Graham Hood, he's far more than just an airline pilot that spoke out. There's a lot going on there. The interviews that Graham does are very, very good, and they cover stuff that in some cases I'm not willing to touch. You'll notice I'm one of the few that was there from the beginning that has not been deplatformed off any platform. Now, that's involved some careful decisions over time, and it's involved me sometimes not talking about things that I want to be talking about. So if you're only following me and you're not following some of these other people that are willing to take more risks, you need to be following them too. And Graham's a great example of that. And the show that you do with John, I just think is an incredible public service. And that episode, I've only seen a short part of it. I have yet to sit down and watch the entire thing. But if you just search for Graham Hood on Facebook, find his page. It's about 3 posts old. It's from yesterday. It's 1 day old. You'll find a short snippet of it. And then in the first comment is the link to Rumble. That's where you want to go. You want to watch this. Now, one other comment just quickly here. Crystal has said, I haven't seen it. She's referring to Battleground Melbourne. This comment came up when I mentioned Battleground Melbourne. Go to battlegroundmelbourne.com. Have I got it here? Yes, I do. Go to battlegroundmelbourne.com. You can watch it for free. Okay? I don't want anything from you. This isn't my story. This is Melbourne's story. This is Victoria's story. You guys crowdfunded it to make it possible for me to make it. And my commitment to you is, if you make it possible for me to make this, then it will be available to watch for free online forever. And that's exactly where you can find it, battlegroundmelbourne.com.
We're just talking about last night's. We were going to say what it was actually about.
Yeah, please. Yeah, because I haven't actually watched the full thing.
Well, look, for a start, I haven't been deplatformed anywhere yet either, and I'm amazed. I cannot believe it. People who share my stuff get into Facebook jail and everything. Thanks, Carol. That's great. Thanks for that comment. And Valerie, yeah, the program was really an unpacking of the testimony given in the parliamentary inquiry into long COVID by former AMA president, Dr. Karen Phelps, who came out straight away and said, she suffered vaccine injuries. Her spouse has suffered vaccine injuries. And she's speaking out against censorship of doctors. And so we needed some professional guys to unpack that. So we got very quickly massed a panel of 3 of our regular experts on our program, Doctors with Voices. We had Professor Dr. Chris Neal, a renowned cardiologist, or former cardiologist now, thanks to APRA, from Melbourne. We had Professor Ted Steele, an epidemiologist of some 50 years experience.
Yeah, right.
And we had Dr. Philip Altman, who has got to be one of the experts about big pharma and how they interact with APRA and ATAGI and the TGA. He's had a 40-year relationship working with the TGA. And we just got them to unpack Karen Phelps's testimony, and they released a couple of other bombshells themselves, especially Philip on where how the vaccine was actually rolled out. And you need to watch it. You need to hear him explain that.
So help me out here, because I just, new baby, everything else. I just haven't had time to drill down into Dr. Karen Phelps' testimony. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Karen Phelps or Dr. Phelps was in person as the head of the AMA, one of the people criticizing the so-called anti-vaxxers and telling everyone to go and get vaccinated, etc.
Yep.
Does she, in her testimony, does she acknowledge the change in her own opinion, or is she just saying this is my opinion?
She still. I saw something of a grab of her, an interview she did with the Today Show, I think yesterday, and she seems to be holding fast that vaccines are still relevant.
Right.
But she's desperate to see an inquiry, a balanced scientific debate with people on both sides. And anybody with any nous would want to do that, because censorship has destroyed our faith in medicine, in health in Australia, and in fact around the world. We've lost our faith in every institution. So she's actually calling for the censorship to be pulled. She wants AHPRA to release its stranglehold on doctors.
Yeah.
They're the main things. And Dr. Chris Neal highlights some of the aspects, some of the words that she used in her testimony very well. They have given us a fair bit of hope, but she's still, I don't know, I guess she's in an awkward position now that she's spoken up. I mean, having been a proponent, but we've got to look at what happened in the UK with Dr. Mahatra. He was the poster boy of vaccines. And when his father died from a vaccine-related injury, he has now become the poster boy of those who are seeking for censorship to be pulled and for a scientific debate to happen as it should, and should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah. There's an interesting comment here that I want to pull out here, largely because, Hoody, I think both you and I, you've got years of experience behind you, and I just love the way that you think and the way that you approach problems. I've got over a decade of experience in new media, which just gives me a perspective that I think is a little bit broader than a lot of the newer entries. And there's a comment here that I think takes a very narrow view of what the role of someone like myself would be. So Ross has taken exception to my comment before that I'm quite careful not to get deplatformed. He says, takes a coward to be scared of being deplatformed. Courageous Hoody pushes boundaries every day. Well, I'll be clear. I'm very grateful for people like Hoody and others who do push the boundaries every day. But there is a place there. No one person can do every single thing. And there is a place for that person that isn't necessarily the edgelord, isn't necessarily pushing the boundaries, but is there for everybody as that acceptable first step. And this is what I've often said. I view my self-appointed role as being the place where people can come first as they first begin to go, hang on, the official narrative doesn't make sense to me anymore. Because everyone needs that first step. If they're going to get sort of broken out of that mold of believing what the government says, and you know the experts are always right, etc., then once that gets broken, once they can no longer hold that position, they go looking for somewhere where they can put their foot and go, okay, now this is my new position over here. And one of the challenges we had, for example, at the protests in Melbourne, was I knew for a fact that there were hundreds of thousands of Victorians in any given month that were looking for a new home because they'd broken out of that trance. They'd broken that hold of the official narrative. And they were looking around saying, okay, I no longer belong here, but where do I belong? Where can I tread? And along the way, they would look at us, they'd look at the protests, and they'd see a sign that says, end the lockdowns. And they'd be like, yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. And they'd see another sign that says, you know, open up the playgrounds. I'm like, yeah, of course, the children shouldn't be locked away from the playgrounds. And then they'd see a sign that says, jail the pedophile politicians. And at that moment, they go, whoa, what the hell is this? And we've lost them. We've lost them forever. Now, that doesn't mean I'm in support of pedophilia. It doesn't mean I want pedophiles to go unpunished. It means that there's a place and a time for each message. So, Ross, my challenge to you would be to have a think about whether every single person should be doing the same thing, pushing the boundaries, being that edgelord, etc., or whether actually we need people to be making tactical decisions and fulfilling different niches and providing a different place for people. Because once someone comes to me and goes, hey, actually, this Topher guy, you know what? He seems sensible. He's not an edgelord. He's not on any of these conspiracy theories, Through me, they get introduced to the likes of, of Hoody, the likes of, so many different others who they can then find their own path through to. But if there wasn't a secure first step, they would never take a step. So that's my response to you, Ross. I'm not offended by what you've said. I don't find that insulting. But I do think that there is a much deeper level of thought that needs to go into what we do and how we do it, so as to actually be able to bring people from the other side to ours.
I'd like to comment on what Ross said. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate you for putting that up. That's a mark of who you are as well. But Ross, I want you to know that one of the things that fired me up so much to do what I've been doing was watching Topher being accosted by police at the front door of his house. Now, Topher's been doing all this stuff, even though he knows that he's been putting the burner under Daniel Andrews and Daniel Andrews' police force. And it was Topher's involvement, along with Christian Mack, whose video I saw as well, got me so fired up to do what I'm doing. I don't see cowardice in any of that. In fact, what I'd like us all to do, Ross, and anybody who thinks that way, I mean, there'll be somebody making a comment now that I'm some kind of shill or a bad actor.
There's been a heap. Trust me. There's been a heap. Yep.
Yeah. So what good does that do? Okay, so let's take Topher Field and Graham Hood out of this whole debacle the last 2 years. We're filling a niche for somebody who really needs us to fill that niche, and we're doing the best we can. I was asleep 2 years ago. I was a sleeper. I had to wake in fright, and the only thing that elevated me to like a meteor in this whole thing was the fact that I was a Qantas pilot. If I was doing anything else,
good night, Debbie. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the replay tomorrow.
Yeah, good night, Debbie. Oh, sorry. Debbie Castle. I know Deb. See you, Debbie. Yep. I used to get really troubled by the fact that people were calling me a bad actor and everything. In fact, I'll give you a hint. I've now worked out that anyone who spruiks publicly about people in the freedom movement being bad actors are actually bad actors.
Too often, yes.
Yeah, and so they're actually destabilizing without realizing it. So we've got to take all this rhetoric out. I mean, we look at the stuff that Michael Gray Griffith's been through. We looked at this. There are people throwing each other under the bus everywhere. We've got to stop doing that. I don't want to play a part of that. I mean, I went into Parliament House in Canberra with John Larder and several others, Auntie Edna, and we took that letter of demand in for Scott Morrison, which was a ploy that we wanted to get into to have a mainstream media interview, and we got one with Channel 7.
Nice.
And the minute we walked out of that, there were certain personalities in the freedom movement who labelled us as paid actors, controlled opposition,
sellouts, blah blah blah. Yep,
sellouts, right? And I know for a fact that we weren't. So what does that do to the credibility of the people who then offer other information that they want us to follow? If I've been called a Freemason and a pedophile by people who know who Freemasons and pedophiles are, how can I believe anything they say about anybody else?
Correct.
So they automatically lose credibility. The other thing I don't like, I'm just an average everyday Aussie who's fighting like crazy to get the spirit of our country back for all of us to enjoy. That's all I'm planning to do. I made it clear when I went to Canberra, I'm here for 5 things. I'm here to open the borders, never close them again. I'm here to end the mandates. I'm here to protect the children from being forcibly jabbed. I'm here to get everybody else's job back, and I want a Royal Commission. They're the 5 things I went there for. I didn't go there for all the other stuff that was there, and because I didn't support any of those other agendas, because I didn't know anything about them, I was a shill, a paid actor. That's right. Let's get beyond that. And we are better than that.
Yeah, and can I add 2 more things? This thing of, if you're not speaking up on every issue, then clearly you're a sellout. Clearly you're a coward. Clearly you're whatever. No, like each of us needs to pick the issues that are vitally important to us, and we're going to speak out. And I spent the first 10 years of my time as a political commentator talking about the mismanagement of irrigation water in the Murray-Darling Basin. Do you know, as far as I'm aware, there is basically 0 other online social media political commentators that have touched that subject, with 1 or 2 exceptions who have touched it once or twice. Does that mean I think all the others are sellouts because they're not willing to touch that issue? No, of course not. Right? Like that's insane. And yet there are people who bring this view. If you're not willing to speak up on the issue that matters to me, then clearly you're a sellout.
You've dropped out there, Topher.
Hang on, I've just dropped out. Have you got me?
I can see your face, I can hear your voice, but now
Okay, yeah, no, I've just had a warning. Apparently, my internet, so someone next door must have just started streaming Game of Thrones or something. So the other thing that really, really gets my goat with all of this is people who assume that if you're in any way successful, and by that I don't even mean financially successful, I just mean if you do something that works in the freedom movement, then clearly you must have had help. You must be one of them. They wouldn't have allowed you to get inside Parliament House, for example, or they wouldn't have allowed you to release a documentary that gets awards. You must be one of them, right? There's this insane, and what that means is that if someone within our movement were to actually start getting traction and were to actually figure out a strategy whereby they were really getting traction and really making a difference, all of these people would immediately turn on them. And so therefore the movement can never grow, because everyone that actually gets it, it's like tall poppy syndrome on steroids.
Yeah,
it's just insane to me, and we've got to grow up and get past all this.
Topher, I've been attacked by people who have said, if you don't throw this person under the bus, if you look, I'll be honest, I was asked to throw Michael Gray Griffith under the bus.
Sure.
And I said, no, I'm not doing trial by social media. I know nothing about it. I'm not going to get involved in it.
Ditto, which is why I've said nothing about it.
That's exactly right. Now, I'm mentioning it because I was told that if I didn't throw him under the bus, there'd be a hit piece put out on me. And I said, I thought we were in this to end coercion and fight bullying. So I can tell you, Topher, I've found that within the freedom movement, because it's anywhere where you get people gathered and there's political and ego and all that sort of stuff, freedom is the first casualty of that. And there's not a lot of freedom in the freedom movement if you disagree with somebody. And I'll tell you another thing that I reckon too. When you made Battleground Melbourne, you would be on the top of Daniel Andrews' hit list, mate. Daniel Andrews would love an excuse to hang you out to dry because you showed his city up under his leadership for what he'd made it. And he is not the kind of man who's going to let you get off lightly. So I think a coward, that's not a word that I'd apply to Topher. Anyway.
Look, I appreciate that, Hoody. I will say, though, and I've been very public about this since February when my family made the decision, we are looking to get out of Victoria. And that was a decision that we made largely for just lifestyle change of scenery. My wife and I have both been in Melbourne all our lives, in my case, since I was 2, so practically all my life. And so we wanted the change of scenery. We wanted to move to a more regional place, smaller, closer to primary production, with just a better lifestyle available. And certainly the outcome of the Victorian election, etc., has done nothing to change our views on that. So I am planning to leave Victoria, and we're working on that right now. We're heading to Albury at some point. We're not sure exactly when it'll be, but we're working towards that. And some people have said, "Oh, you're a coward. You're running away from the fight, etc." Like you know as well as I do, Hoody. You have to have a thick skin in this game, and that you're going to get attacked just as often by the people that you're trying to help as you will by the people that are trying to stop you. And if you can't handle that, then maybe just don't become a Hoody and don't become a Topher.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, some of the attacks have been vile, far out. There's some people have dedicated websites to tearing me apart because of my porn addiction. Let me, spoiler alert, I had a porn addiction.
Yeah.
It's gone. Yeah, I had a porn addiction and it's gone. It's gone because Jesus Christ has worked with me on building my character and restoring my character defects. Now, the reason I mentioned that in the first place is because it gives you, who probably have a porn addiction as well. I'm not talking to you, Topher, but I'm talking
no, I know. The people attacking on that line, the people who went, aha!
Yeah, it gives you permission to actually say, well, if he can talk about his, I can talk about mine too. That's the only reason I mention it. I've been in a public space on that issue for 15 or 16 years. I've been trying to help men overcome that addiction. And, look, some people are just not happy, and you never see them. You never see them in public. You say to them, look, I'm going to be at Wollongong, or I'm going to be at Melbourne or something. Come and talk to me. You never see them. They sit on the keyboard and they type away. But it's okay. It's okay. And I want the people who are attacking me to know that you're actually in my prayers at night.
Correct.
Because whatever it is that's causing you to hate on me or others, based in a pain that you haven't dealt with yet. And I had to deal with a lot of pain in my life, and I want that for you. So God bless you, and truly, I am who I am, and that's it. I stopped performing years ago. Believe me, I'm sick of serving an ego. I've done that most of my life. I'm past that. There's no ego in what I'm doing. I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it because I love my country and I love the people in it, and that's you, and that's whether you hate me or not. And there's a chapter in the Bible. There's a verse in the Bible, Galatians 1:10, and it says, "For I speak to please God, not man. For if I speak to please man, how can I please God? What you think of me is none of my business. It's what God thinks of me. That's what this is all about." And so I'm just going to keep being annoying for those people who are trying to take away our basic freedom of rights. And if I annoy you in the process, I'm sorry, but maybe just have a think about why I annoy you. Why am I pushing the buttons? Why is Topher doing that? Anyway.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. And I was reflecting on this actually literally earlier today, thinking about this upcoming chat. And there are two people in this movement who I would describe as exceptionally humble. And of course, if you describe yourself as exceptionally humble, then instantly you've lost all credibility, right?
Yeah.
But there are two people that I've had the pleasure of getting to know that I'm just like, no, you really don't have a dog in this fight. You really don't have an ego in this fight. And I would put that down to Rukshan Fernando down here in Melbourne and yourself. Now, you can't agree with that, of course, because then instantly you...
I'm honored to be seen that way, because it's good to be comprehended. Abraham Lincoln said once, it's wonderful to be comprehended. And I just want to be comprehended. I just want people to know what my motives are. They're not dissimilar to anyone else's.
Correct. All right, let's move on. You mentioned a minute ago Jesus, and given that it is Christmas time, the time when we do celebrate the birth of Jesus, someone that I believe to be God in human form, God on earth, and I believe you do too, Graham. This time of year, this Christmas, it's a challenging one for a lot of people. It's a challenging one for a lot of people that have been victimized in the last couple of years, that have been marginalized, that have been treated very, very poorly. But Jesus really gave us a lot to think about and had a lot to say about how we are to respond and how we are to forgive. What does this time of year, what does Christmas mean for you with all of what you've been through, the hate that's been spewed at you? But okay, no, actually, no, I'm going to change my question. Moving on from you, moving on from me, you've heard so many stories of other people and what they've gone through. And what would you say to them at Christmas time now?
Well, the reason most people fall into despair is because they feel unloved and disconnected. And the one thing I can say to anybody who's feeling that way, in Christ, you are always connected. In Christ, you are loved. I had, when I came to faith, I came from atheism to faith in a very short space of time. And I had to examine, in order to walk a Christian walk, I had to know who Christ was. And I didn't really know. But what got me was the fact that after doing a bit of reading and a bit of thinking about it, that Jesus Christ died the worst possible death on a cross that anyone could imagine. What he went through was horrendous. So a rotten sinner like me could have a second chance. And that gave me everything I needed to
100%.
to follow him. And everything in my life is very cliche to go WWJD, what would Jesus do? But every time I'm perplexed about something and I want to get a different perspective on it, I actually ask, I wonder what Jesus would do if he was in my shoes. And it's normally the exact opposite to what I as a human being would do. and that is, if I want to punch someone's lights out, Jesus would tell me to love him.
Yeah.
So what Christmas means to me is that the grace extended to us from the cross, which wouldn't have happened without the birth of Christ, carries us through the dark times.
Yeah.
We have to be the light on the hill, not the light of doctrine. I'm talking, we have to be the light of love and compassion on the hill. Yeah. We need to be something that people can look to that gives them hope. And I've had thousands of atheists contact me and say similar things. They say, look, I don't believe in God, but I can't sleep at night unless I hear the prayer at the end of your club grubbery. And I say, well, what do you do with the nights I don't do club grubbery? They say, we replay the last one. Okay. And I say to them, what do you think God's trying to tell you? And they say, things like, I'm trying to work that out. And I say, well, he's already told you one thing. And they say, what's that? Well, you're no longer an atheist because you're listening for the voice of God. But if at the end of the day, if you're alone in the physical sense, if you really have that relationship with Jesus Christ, you're never alone. And it's that relationship that those people who do have a relationship with Christ enjoy, that brings them to a point where their life is about service and their life is about actually caring about the fact that you're alone, and that you need nurture and that you need love, and you need to be connected. And so that's why I keep saying to people at the end of every program, what you did yesterday got you to today, and what you did today will get you to tomorrow. And it's vitally important that you remember this is a day at a time process. And Christ loves you enough to redraw the blueprint of your life around every mistake you made yesterday. Tomorrow, an opportunity where you can come closer to what he wants you to have. So we are never alone in Christ. And what bugs me about Christmas is I don't do Christmas. Michelle and I don't do Christmas. We don't do the commercial aspects of it.
Sure.
Where God is being debunked Christ is being cancelled in our society, Topher.
Oh, sure.
Christmas and Easter, because they're holidays, holy days. Christmas and Easter will go on because the economy will suffer without them, but Christ is being cancelled. There's a lot of stuff we've got to come to terms with, but I tell you, mate, without Christ, I would have been toast. And I don't. Look, I've had people say to me, are you a doomsday prepper? And I say, no. Well, you're self-sufficient. Well, yeah, I want to, because I want to be able to live a healthy life, grow my own food, and be self-sufficient, have my own electricity, so I don't get blacked out all the time, and I don't have to pay rising electricity bills. I want to have peace and serenity. And if I'm a Christian and I'm also not vaccinated, those things all automatically qualify me as a domestic terrorist in Australia.
Apparently.
And I look like a terrorist, don't I? But what I say to people, I've had some doomsday preppers say to me, have you got gold bullion? Have you got guns and all that? And I go, I've got a 410 to shoot foxes with.
Yeah, a little tiny shotgun.
But I could never lower a weapon on somebody and pull the trigger. I could never do that. It doesn't mean I'll shy away from a fight. Like Desmond Doss in World War II, the only non-combatant ever to win a Congressional Medal of Honor. He was a combat medic. He was a Seventh-day Adventist combat medic. And I'll be in the front line with everybody else, but I'll be there to patch people up. I won't be there to shoot people.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid. But for me, Christ is about serving others and loving people enough that we can get through the hard times together. Yeah. And we just lean into him, and we keep it really simple. And for me, Christ is about humility, and that's why. There would have been a time in my life where the following that's around, people like us at the moment would have done my head in. It would have done my head in. And I'm so grateful that I'm not into it. Look, honestly, if I woke up tomorrow and all my following was gone, I'd say, well, I've had my season, Christ used me for this time. Yeah. So Christmas is a time for family, but sadly, as a result of the last couple of years, those families have been destroyed, a lot of them, and there's a lot of people who won't be going there. And all I can say is just know that Christ loves you. If you're going to be alone at Christmas, know that Christ loves you, and so do I, and so does Topher. Yeah, and absolutely. And absolutely. we will get through this together. We will get through this together with Christ.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we have yet to process, and I include myself in this. The last couple of years have been an incredibly foreign experience. And whatever age you are, chances are you've never in your life gone through something like the last couple of years. And that means for each of us, it takes time. We haven't got experience to fall back on, at least not directly. It's going to take some time to kind of process this. And figure out what it means and the ways in which we should let it affect us and the ways in which we shouldn't. And that's a process that I think we're all still working through. One of the things that I've been reflecting on a lot, there are people that I love and care about very, very deeply that are very much on board with the government's narrative, right? 100%. The idea that might be wrong is almost sacrilegious. I mean, it's almost, at this point, it's almost taken on a religious element to it, where it's an article of faith for them, and yet we're going to be in the same room and having Christmas pudding and potato salad and talking and playing board games and everything else. And with some people that's easy. Some people are good at just being in each other's company and not having to go to the controversial stuff. And there are some people where that's a bit more difficult, and one of the things that I've been reflecting on recently is, if someone hasn't listened to me yet in the last 3 years, 2.5 years, they're not going to. Right? They're not. There's nothing new that I can say to them now that is going to give them a Damascus Road experience where they suddenly change their views and perspective and blah, blah, blah. It's not happening. It's not coming from me anyway. Right? There's nothing left for me to say.
No.
And so the priority shifts then. I mean, I love them and I care about them. I want to change their perspective because I care about them. Right? This is because I look at the way they live their life and I just look at it and go, come on, you can do so much more for so many more people if you could just sort out a few things in your head. But to then sit there and just keep beating them over the head with what I consider to be the truth is totally counterproductive. And so the realization, it's a cliche, and I've heard it a million times before. We've all heard it a million times before, but it's true. People won't remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel.
So true.
And maybe the priority this year, sorry, I've just got to put this comment up. I love this. This is awesome. I just love this. Maybe the priority is to actually focus on treating them like family again and making them feel like family again. And not allowing, I remember back on, was it November 20th, 2021, right? November 20th, 2021, I gave a speech at what was the biggest political rally in Melbourne's history. And it was just an absolute privilege to be there. And I talked about the need to remove Daniel Andrews, something which sadly my fellow Victorians have not done. And we need to. But I said beyond that, like getting rid of Daniel Andrews is it really is only the beginning. What we need to do is to wipe away that legacy of hate, that legacy of division, that legacy of pitting family members against each other, of suspicion, of intolerance. And what I've kind of reflected on in the last couple of weeks is that we can start doing that even while Daniel Andrews is still in Spring Street. And we can start doing that by treating family like family again.
Yep.
Right? And actually focusing on how we're making them feel rather than focusing on whether we've told them the latest thing that we read, or did you see that interview that Hoody did with those doctors, blah, blah, blah. That's good stuff. But if they haven't listened to you yet, then they're not going to, and maybe it's time to shift focus. And I saw this play out in I won't say who it was, but people close to me. I would never have thought that they would come around. I really wouldn't. And everything that could have been said to them had been said to them by someone, right? Whether it was me or somebody else. Everything that could have been said to them had been said. And they, no. And then they suffered an external factor that happened to them. And now all of a sudden, they've come back to one of the people that was telling them what they needed to hear and didn't want to hear, but was still treating them like family. And they've come back to that person, and now they're actually having a real conversation about this. Why did they go back to that person? Because that's the person that they felt that they could go back to.
Yeah.
Right? They had enough relationship left with that person that when something happened and they were looking for answers, they felt that they could go to that person, and the person wasn't going to rub it in their face.
Yep.
Wasn't going to say, I told you so. Right? None of that. This person treated them like family. And in return, when they went looking for someone to try and explain what had happened to them, they actually went back to that person. And now we're seeing some real progress with them. Right. So that's sort of my musing on this Christmas is if they're going to listen to you, they would have listened to you. And if they're not going to listen to you, Maybe
Somebody's turned on the Game of Thrones again. You've dropped out.
Yeah, sorry. From my perspective, you dropped out. I'm not quite sure who dropped out there, but can you say that again?
Yeah, no, just saying you dropped out.
Look, okay, yeah.
Look, I agree with what you're saying. I've been asked this question at a lot of the town hall meetings that we've been having on the tour. You know, how do we approach people? Look, our only job is to love them. That's all we do. We just love them, and we're compassionate. We've just got to be compassionate. We've got to give up on our desire, our addiction to being right. I've never wanted to be more wrong in my whole life than I have been over this issue in the last 2 years. Because if I'm right, I'm going to be doing a lot of grieving. And I don't want to go through that. I'd rather, look, I'm at a stage in my life now where I'd rather stand on somebody's toes and stand by their graveside. That's how I feel.
Sure.
So for me, it's my only job is to love them. I don't have to think about strategies. If I frame everybody in a frame of love, and I try and do that as often as I can. I fail a lot, but I try and do it as often as I can. I love most people I come in contact with, even though I don't like some of them.
Sure.
Our little mate there who called you a shill, you know, he didn't have his face and he had a different.
Yeah.
So if there was a still, you know, but still love him. But if all we do is say, what have I got to do in this situation? I just love them. So if you're looking at somebody who's saying, you know, oh, I'm a bit concerned about this, or I don't know how to approach this subject, or I'm feeling a bit uncertain about a decision I made, then in loving them, your first reaction is, I hope they're okay. So you say that. I hope you're okay. Are you feeling okay? Is there anything I can support you with? And you put the shift straight back onto them and give them an opportunity to realize that you are a safe haven and they can talk to you about anything, and just do that. And all we've got to do is keep loving and stop hating and stop having this desire to be right. Because you miss out a lot when you think you're always right. You miss out a lot. And I learned that in the airline industry. The worst enemy of anyone in the flying game, anyone in medical, anyone who's got someone's life in their hand is ego. Yeah. It's the worst enemy. You've got to forego that, and you've got to be prepared to hear somebody else come up with the answer. Like I used to wear 4 gold stripes here that said I was the captain, and therefore the captain must have all the answers. There were lots of situations in my daily job where I didn't have the answers, and I used to ask my co-pilot, or I'd ask a flight attendant. You know, what am I missing that you're seeing that I'm not seeing? And that's how we bring this about. That's why it's important now. As much as we want to see people who have perpetrated some of the things that have gone on in the last couple of years, as much as we want to see them punished in a way for what they've done, what's important now is we stop this from happening immediately and make sure it never happens again. Yeah. So what we've got to do is work out how it happened in the first place. Forget about punishing people. We'll worry about that later. We've got to stop this from happening. And so I think if we approach everything in a calm, a lot of people will be saying that I'm too soft. We've got to come out. You know, we've got to rebel and blow up Parliament and take over.
Yeah. I have the same people in my inbox as well.
Yeah. So we've got to really focus on what's going to work. And John and I decided some time back that we were just going to keep standing in what we thought was a rational truth. We didn't come to do a story on everything that was sent to us, because a lot of what we get, misinformation, is as rife on our side of the fence as it is on others.
100%.
And we don't want to add to people's anxiety. We want to give them hope and give them courage and strength to face what's coming with a rational mind, because anyone who is anxious and perplexed, they don't normally make good rational decisions. You know, most, like my wife's a nurse. She was an RN for 40 odd years, and they, you know, she's very stoic when it comes to emergency situations. She goes to triage straight away. It's only later on, when the dust is settled and everyone is okay, where she might burst into tears. You know what I mean?
but we need those people who just in the moment, they can just be bang, focus, work mode.
Yeah. There you go. Look, Kat, you know, 1 John 4:8.
Yeah.
And I've been using 1 John 4:8 to describe to people before I baptise. I baptised 50 people this year, Topher. It was awesome.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing.
And what a pleasure! What a lovely thing to do. But I say to them, I want you to understand that God is love, and I use 1 John 4:8 for that. Yeah. And then anyway, I digress. But where were we?
Well, there was a really important comment here. I'm just scrolling up to try and find it again. When you mentioned all the fake accounts, how so much of the trolling, the accusations, etc., they come from accounts with fake pictures and fake names. We had very strong agreement from Al Gore. It's wonderful, former Vice President of the United States. It's wonderful to have you watching. Obviously, this is a genuine account. Says, yeah, don't you just get sick of all these fake accounts? Al, it's wonderful that you feel our pain, Al. I really do appreciate that. And when you feel like updating your Inconvenient Truth movie to actually have some truth in it, let me know. I'd be happy to help with that project. Thank you. Look, we've got. It's funny, and I'm sure you have this as well. You have the trolls that are actually there with their tongues firmly in their cheek to have a bit of fun, and I really enjoy them. I really do. And then you get the ones that are just bores, that are just, whatever. They're just going to say whatever. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. It's your right to do that. You can do that. But there is in the middle there's these ones that are actually there to have fun. And Al Gore, obviously I have no idea what the real name is, but Al Gore is one of the ones that's fun on my page.
He doesn't want us to know his real name because that would be a very inconvenient truth.
It might be, yes. But he's here. He's here till Christmas, everybody. Only 70.
Look, I've got the Polish emblem here because we've got 2 beautiful Polish people staying with us at the moment, and they came lovely, lovely people. And
just as long as you don't have red shoes on, that would be a problem.
And what is that with red shoes? I don't understand a lot of the stuff that people get upset about.
Most of this stuff I didn't know about either. I've had to learn about because of the trolls. So apparently, having red shoes means that you're a Freemason.
Okay.
I don't know if Nike knows about this or not, or if there's just a massive Freemason market that they cater to every time they release a pair of red shoes. I'm not sure. I had a look at my wife's.
Dorothy at the Wizard of Oz was a
correct.
Freemason.
Must be a Freemason. I had a look in my wife's shoe cabinet the other day, and I was horrified to discover that she's actually a Freemason at least 2 times. So maybe more. Maybe there's other shoes that I haven't seen yet. But no, there's all different things. There's theories around different hand positions and blah blah blah. And I just. Okay. So
about this, the red poppy.
Sorry?
The red poppy. There's a theory about the red poppy.
Is there?
Yeah, for me, it's apparently a flower of the New World Order or something. For me, it's a remembrance. We should be remembering every day the sacrifices.
Yeah, Flanders Fields. Come on. Yeah. Well, Tim, I think, is on the money here. I think they make this stuff up as they go. There are people in the world, if I can quote, is it Alfred from Batman? Some people just want to watch the world burn, right? There are people in the world who just want attention. They just want to start up a social media page and have it get big. And they will just come up with absolutely anything that's going to get attention. And this is where so many conspiracy theories come from. You know what this is? You know what that actually is? That is a neutral hand position that is trained. If you were to do any public speaking training, and if you've ever spoken in public, which is the most frightening thing, people report that's more frightening than death, right? So if people were going to be at a funeral, they'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy, right? That's literally what people are saying. It's more frightening than death. If you're public speaking, sometimes you find yourself very self-conscious about your hands. And all of a sudden, your brain just goes, what are you doing with your hands? Is that normal? Does that look normal? Is that weird? What should you be doing with your hands? It's just this weird thing that your brain can do sometimes. And so a lot of public speaking training, as well as being about breathing and eye contact and various other things, is about your hands and what you do with them. And this is trained as a neutral hand position, as a go-to for any time your brain starts to do this stupid thing where it gets distracted by the position of your hands. You just do that. You put your hands away. That's what it's referred to. Just put your hands away. Okay, bang. They're out of the way. You don't have to think about them anymore. And so then all of a sudden there's photos of all these different world leaders and actors and people that have all had public relations training. They've all had training in how to speak in public. And, oh, look, that person's got that hand position. That person's got that hand position. Oh, this must mean something. And they build this entire conspiracy theory around it. And it's nuts. It wastes everybody's time. It is nothing but distraction. And it really, really, really gets my goat that these people get so much attention.
I've had a lot of allergy in my eyes in the last few months, and it drives me nuts. and this eye in particular tends to play up a little bit. And there are times when I almost wish I could just close it. But then if I appear on camera with one eye shut, what am I? Am I a Freemason or something?
Yeah. No, that's right. So I did the posters for Battleground Melbourne, and we had some early tease marketing before the official poster and everything else. And I decided that it would look really dramatic. This is before I knew this. I'm sure a lot of this stuff's literally just been made up in the last 2 years. But this is before I knew supposedly that only showing one eye is like an Illuminati thing. And so I felt it was really dramatic to have everyone's head, myself, Rukshan, Avi, Crystal Mitchell, there were a couple of others, Monica Smith and the MP. What was the MP's name? Goodness me. I'm friends with him and I can't even think of his name. The Liberal Democratic Party MP that just got re-elected, the one that did, David Limbrick. Thank you, Tim, for the comment. I just had a total mind blank. Everyone's now jumping in with the name. Thank you. So I released a poster with each of us with our face cut in half. So half of our face is off the poster and the other half is on the poster. And then words, he risked everything or she risked everything, because that was the tease campaign that we were doing around the documentary prior to launch. Soon as I launched this campaign, my inbox is full of people saying, aha, I knew it. You're just a shill. You're Illuminati. You're this, you're that. And other people going, Topher, don't you know this is Illuminati symbolism? Like, I know you're not Illuminati, but don't you understand what you've done here? And I'm sitting in the middle going, it's dramatic. It's eye-catching. It gets people's attention, which is what a tease campaign is supposed to do. I don't give a rat's who else uses it. I'm going to use it if it works. How much energy have we wasted on this crap?
My sentiments exactly, my friend. My sentiments exactly. And it's all that sort of stuff which has made the task of the opposition, let's say, that is the mainstream media and the governments, ignore the fact that 8% of the Australian population were on the streets rallying for nearly a year every weekend.
Yeah.
You know the 3.5% rule, don't you? When 3.5%,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Okay. With 3.5% of a population rally in peace, the democratic government normally falls. Well, they didn't in this case, and I worked it out one day. I sat down with a calculator and I figured out, well, 3.5% is 760,000 people of the Australian population. You guys were getting that in Melbourne nearly. Some weekends you were getting up around the 500,000 to 700,000.
No, look, I hate to burst your bubble. I've gone through in a great deal of detail a combination of two different videos. One was an aerial shot that was taken by a friend of mine from a drone of the park. I'll think of the name of the gardens, but the gardens that we gathered in on that week where we had the biggest protest ever. And then you can tell because of the position of a vehicle that was moving with the protest. Based on the position of that vehicle, you can tell that drone footage was taken at very close to the same time as a person, as True Arrow Events began walking through the crowd. Sam McClelland was his name, began walking through the crowd with a GoPro up on a stick. So you had the crowd that was gathered at the park, then you had this crowd stretching back through the city, winding its way back through the city. And when you put the two together, the picture of the crowd at the park and then all the people, the number of people seen by Sam as he's walking backwards through the crowd with the GoPro, I put our numbers at approximately 200 to 250,000.
Yep.
Okay. That's my best guess. I'm not saying that's authoritative, but I think it's a hell of a lot better than a lot of the other guesses that other people made. I think people got excited. I think people wanted it to be huge. When you're in the middle of it, once there's 10,000 people, you can't tell the difference anymore.
It's very hard to tell.
Once you get above 10,000 people, you can't tell the difference between 10,000 and 100,000. It's very rare that you would get a vantage point that would actually allow you to see the difference between those two sizes of crowd. And I genuinely don't think, I said, and I regret saying this, but the word that reached us on the stage was that Sky News had reported that we had 450,000 people. Now, I've tried to find that report since, and I haven't been able to find it. So I don't even know if that was true at the time, but that's what was said to us, and that's what was passed around to us at the stage. So I used the 450,000 figure from the stage, and I regret that now. That was an error of judgment. And looking at the evidence, I think we're looking at between 200 and 250,000. Now, that's not to say, though, that's a massive achievement. That is a phenomenal achievement. That is history making. The protests against the Vietnam War did not get to that size. They got to 70, 80,000 according to official figures.
But the point I'm wanting to make about, regardless of the number, the point I'm wanting to make is that I went to my first rally.
Mm.
Most of the people who were bolstering, you never saw those numbers before because most of the people who went have never rallied before.
Correct.
Why were they there? They were there because they were against the lockdowns, they were against the border closures, they were against the mandates, they wanted the jobs back. Those 5 things that I said. Now, when they're confronted with, oh, you're wearing red shoes, or why are you wearing a red poppy, or why haven't you got a T-shirt that's got the the suppression orders written on it or something like that?
Yeah.
Like me, they go, what?
Yeah, that's right.
What are you talking about? And I think that's why a lot of people shied away eventually because it was like, oh, this is way too screwy for me. Because look, and I've had a lot of people say, if you get that many people at the rallies and still we can't seem to get a victory anywhere, what have we got to do? Well, my answer, and John and I have talked about this extensively, we're only going to tip the scales when we get as many people on our end of the scales as are on the other. Now, if the rallies weren't achieving that in the space of time that we had, then how do we wake more people up? Now, the one thing I know is that once you wake up, you never go back to sleep.
Correct.
I will never go back to sleep. And so if I'll give you an example I've used a couple of times. When I was a cattle mustering pilot in Western Queensland on a property of 3.5 million acres, there was one part of that property which was nearly 750,000 acres, and it hadn't been touched for about 40 years. And all the cattle on there were wild. They were clean-skinned cattle. They'd never seen a man. They were it was Animal House. And we were in the middle of a cattle boom, and we were sent up there to muster all these cattle and get them
good
to
luck.
Yeah. So I was flying the aeroplane. We had about a dozen guys on horseback, half a dozen on motorbikes, and about 4 bull-running Toyotas. It was a pretty big stock camp. And we took it up to Connemara, this property, and I could get the cattle to do anything I wanted with the aeroplane. No problem at all. I would bump 1,000 head of cattle down a pad, like a track, that they would walk to go to water every afternoon, and I would get them down to a clay pan where all the stock camp were hidden in the bushes around the edge of the clay pan. And then I would climb up and I'd call out on the two-way radio, they're all yours, go get them.
Yeah.
And for a week, all I saw was a battle. Like Battleground Melbourne had nothing on what I saw from the air. It was mayhem. And we had dead horses, we had a ringer with a broken leg, and all the cattle got away. And the boss said, the only way we're going to catch these cattle is to bring tame cattle from the other property and as a mob. So we'll bring 1,000 head up, and it took a week to walk them up there. And we walked them up there, and we were going to put the wild cattle into the tame cattle. And we thought that'll work. It didn't work. The wild cattle took the tame cattle. We lost the coaches, what we call the coacher cattle.
Yeah.
So for the only way we were going to clean that property out was to put trap yards on the water where the cattle drank and get them half a dozen at a time and truck them out. What was going to be done in about 3 weeks of mustering was going to take about 5 years. And I believe we're at that phase now that all we can do is continue. Those of us who are doing what you and I are doing, and some of the others, and Maria Z and say lockdown and all that.
Yeah.
All we're doing is waking maybe a few more people up each time who will not go back to sleep, and they will wake a few more people up, and eventually we'll get the scales tipped, and that's when we're going to be able to achieve something. That's what I think, but I don't know that. But it's what I'm playing. It's the game plan that I've set with John Larder, and that's what I've been saying to the people at the town hall meetings, and they love the idea. If everything else we've done hasn't worked, we've got to do something. We don't just give up and say everything's gone back to normal, or you guys are all shills.
Yeah. Look, it's immensely counterproductive. One of the things that I just started saying out of habit to people, because during all the protests, right, I would go to a protest and see what unfolded, and I was very upfront about the fact that I'm not a frontline guy, right? You won't find me on the very front line face to face with the cops. You'll find me about 3 rows back with the camera documenting what happens on the front line, but also with a tactical eye. I'm watching, and if you watch my slow chats, I'm looking down every alleyway. I'm talking about what I'm seeing, the concerns that I've got, the contingency plans and options that.
He's dropped off again. You've dropped off again, Topher.
Am I back?
Your face is there. I can hear your voice.
Okay,
Now
all right.
you're back.
All
That's
right.
okay.
So I'd be talking tactics all the way through. That was my focus when I was on the ground. And then I would get home, and either that night or the following day, I would have a tactical chat with anyone that wanted to listen, to talk about, okay, what do we get right? What do we get wrong? What are some of the lessons we need to learn from what just happened on the streets of Melbourne now? And I'm literally doing like a coach's chat on an illegal protest, like painting a massive target on my back. But one of the real sort of realizations that I had along the way was that the same tactics very rarely worked twice. It was constantly evolving, because the police would see us do something new for the first time that we'd never done before. And then they would factor that into their planning for the following month, because these were typically once every 2 weeks or once every 4 weeks, depending on which timeline we're talking about here. And so by the time we hit the ground a month later, we knew that we couldn't come in with the same approach. Now, when I say we, there were the organizers that would communicate with me and tell me what they were planning. And there was myself, and there were a handful of others. But then you've got the hive mind that kicks in. You've got just all of the other people that have showed up, and they haven't been a party to any of the other conversations about what the plans are, or what we're going to do, or how we're going to handle police violence or what have you. So we then had to communicate internally within the crowd to get the crowd to come along with us. But at the same time, we couldn't identify ourselves, or the organizers. I could identify myself as Topher Field, YouTuber. That was fine. But the organizers couldn't afford to identify themselves as organizers, because the organizers were getting their doors kicked in and getting violently arrested at the time. So we had this incredible communication challenge and an incredible tactical challenge on the ground every single month. Now, what I learned through all of that is a couple of really interesting things. The primary thing I learned among them that just gives me so much hope and so much encouragement is the average person left to their own devices tends to make pretty good decisions. Most of the time. There were a couple of real clangers. There were a couple of moments in time where the hive mind, the crowd, the protest mind made a bad decision, right? The day that Matthew Lawson got shot was one of them. We could have walked up Elizabeth Street away from the police, but a couple of hotheads wanted to go towards where the police were, and then the crowd followed them. Bad mistake. Shouldn't have happened. But that's actually the exception. And over the course of these protests, over and over and over again, even as the tactics are evolving constantly, somehow the crowd generally kept on making really good decisions. And I develop an awful lot of hope out of that, because this year and this coming year is going to be different to last year, which is different to the year before. And we're all in a different situation. But I have a lot of optimism in the average Australian as they look at what's in front of them and they try and make their decisions about what they want to do. And they talk to each other about what they want to do. And overall, I have a lot of optimism that exactly the strategy that you're talking about, as people, we move away from sort of the mass communication and towards the individual communication. And my hope is that this Christmas and this new year is going to be a time where people take a step backwards, okay, back off a little bit, treat people like family, treat people like friends, treat people the way that you would like to be treated. And that's actually going to open up doors down the line. And we're going to start to be able to, or not start, we're going to continue to be able to win these people one at a time.
We've just got to love each other.
Mm.
We've just got to love each other. I mean, I remember on the 12th of February in Canberra, the big rally rather. There was so much going on in Canberra. Most of it was fantastic, but there was some pretty dark stuff going on in there. And, some of the trolls were actually visible in my face. And
They were in real life for a change, instead of hiding behind the keyboard like all the trolls on here.
And then I realised that I was there for those 5 things, like ending mandates and stuff like that, open borders. But I realised that there were a lot of people who were there for other agendas, and those agendas were based in a pain that is unknown to me.
Yeah.
There are people there. Look, 7 million people in Australia have been sexually abused as children, Topher.
Yeah.
7 million.
Yeah.
Now, most of those have never had justice. Michelle was one of those. My wife was one of those. She went to the Royal Commission. She's been outspoken on these matters and done a lot of great work as an advocate. I remember going up to the stage thinking, what am I going to say? Because most of the people were there for mandates and things like that.
Yeah.
What I needed to say that was on my heart was for all those people who felt like their agenda wasn't being pushed, that I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
I can't begin to imagine where their pain's coming from. But you shouldn't be looking at one individual to rise up to talk about everything. We discussed this earlier. And
Yeah.
so I said to them, people shouldn't categorize those who are suffering a certain pain that takes them down the pathway to a different agenda. They shouldn't categorize them as being nut jobs or tin hat wearers or whatever. These are people that are feeling a pain. Now, the people who are really annoyed about the suppression orders, for example, if we go back to those numbers, 7 million people, that's a lot of people who are saying we've never had justice and the kids need to be protected. Yeah. And nobody that I know, unless they had that intent, would disagree with them. But where do we find justice for every single cause? The way I see it, if we eventually get to a stage where if the COVID narrative is the thing that opens up the government, the bureaucracies, the corporations to the scrutiny that they deserve, then that's like filleting a fish. We're going to find a whole bunch of stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
That once we've dealt with the COVID, well, what's this about? If you've been corrupt in this, where have you been corrupt in other areas? We've got to start somewhere. And me, myself, and you and Joel Jamal, for example, you've been my go-to people in the election planning and strategies thing. I've thoroughly enjoyed the stuff you and Joel do. And you've been able to do it in a dispassionate way and in a largely neutral way so that we can make our own decisions. You're just putting up the numbers. And so we need that. We need that because we need to base our strategies on what we do based on those particular things. But you have a role to play. I have a role to play. Everybody in this game has a role to play. Yeah. And we should all cut each other enough slack to allow us to play that part because maybe we're just a unique part in the puzzle. When it all comes together and clicks together, the picture is complete and we start getting victories that we need to bring our country back to where it needs to go.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly delicate balancing act because on the one hand, here I am saying, look, maybe consider taking a step back with your own family. If with people that you've just banged on and banged on and banged on and they've heard it all already, maybe you need to think about changing tack. At the same time, if someone were to say to me, we can't afford to take the pressure off, we can't take our foot off the gas, I'd be saying, you're absolutely right. We can't take our foot off the gas. And so there is this balancing act and this judgment that's needed, this wisdom that's needed in any given situation. When you're at Christmas with your family, the approach is necessarily different to when you're in public in some other context, or you're dealing with other people in some other context. I wouldn't advocate for a moment taking the pressure off. I certainly think we need to keep the pressure on. People like Karen Phelps, finally, very imperfectly, as far as I can tell. Like I said, I haven't yet looked at your breakdown of what she's sort of said, and I look forward to doing that hopefully tomorrow. But we're seeing more and more celebrities coming out, more medical experts who are the respected experts. I mean, we've had experts all the way along. That's why I spoke up. I wouldn't have spoken up if it weren't for genuine experts, because I'm not an epidemiologist. But when an epidemiologist like Professor John Ioannidis, who is literally the dude who taught all the other epidemiologists epidemiology, when he's speaking up in March 2020, I sit up and pay attention. So we've had experts all along. What's changing now is it's the experts that the government said were experts. It's the ones that they put up there and said, here are your experts. Now some of them are beginning to break ranks. And now is definitely not the time to be easing up or taking the pressure off. But there is also just a need to recognize that there is more to life and there is more to human relationship than just being right and proving yourself right and jumping on the latest opportunity to prove yourself right. We're coming into Christmas now, and you've said you don't buy into the commercialized sort of aspects of Christmas, and I certainly respect that. We certainly do the gift giving, that side of things. It's not lavish, but we do that. I've been explaining to my son at great lengths that Santa Claus isn't real, but he's decided that he is real, regardless of my and that I'm just a part of the conspiracy to try and convince all the kids that he's not real. So my son is a conspiracy theorist already. So I'm working on that. That'll take a bit of time. But, come 3 years' time when he's 9 years old and he realizes that Santa Claus isn't actually real, I'll be able to say, yes, son, I was telling you the truth all the way through. I was trying to get you to understand, which I think is a better position than putting yourself in a position where you have to say, well, yes, son, I lied to you for the first 9 years of your life. But trust me, I won't, everything else I tell you while you're a teenager will be true. Well, I think that I had reason to doubt that. But we're dealing with very, very delicate times. And from my perspective, this last year actually saw me go through the lowest point in my life. Which is interesting because I would have thought it'd be, 2022, 2021. Sorry, 2021, 2020. But I didn't realize it at the time until afterwards. But 2022 actually had what for me was really, really the lowest time in my life. And it followed after I released Battleground Melbourne. And I sort of lived through 2020, lived through 2021, waiting for the arrest, dealing with the amount of hurt and pain and people reaching out to me and asking for support and wanting me to hear their sort of story and all that sort of stuff. I talk a little bit about that in Battleground Melbourne Live, which was the live event that we did at the CPAC conference. I got through all of that. By the end of that, I was drinking heavily. I was not sleeping. I was not in a good way, but I didn't recognize it at the time. Then I rolled straight out of that into making Battleground Melbourne, and Battleground Melbourne took up the last half of 2021 for me. Mm-hmm. And I tried to release that before Christmas. It wasn't successful. I then did a release early in January, and the audio was bad, so I had to remaster that. I won't go into the story, but had to remaster that straight away and fix things that hadn't been done correctly. Got that right, and then rolled straight out of that into the election because I was asked multiple times, and eventually I agreed to run for the Senate in Tasmania for the Liberal Democratic Party. And it was while I was down in Tassie campaigning that for the first time I began to go, you know what, I'm not okay. Because I think it's not that I was in denial. I didn't know that there was anything to deny before that. I just hadn't noticed. And I began to kind of go, hang on, this isn't me. This isn't how I treat people. This isn't how I treat my kids and my wife and people around me. This isn't me. But I didn't know what it was yet. And that took some time. And I know, Hoody, you've been through some pretty serious soul-searching times in your life. You've been through some times where you've really had to figure out who you are and what you actually believe and what you actually stand for. For those who might be in that moment, and now I'm working my way through that moment, and I'm certainly not in the place that I was. I'm in a better place than I was. I'm not 100%, but I'm in a better place than I was. And I've got amazing family and good people around me, and I'm doing the work to sort of claw my way back, right? Some days are better than others, but overall, doing a lot better. But there are other people who are right now at that worst point. Some of them who haven't even admitted it to themselves yet.
Yep.
From your experience and from all of the people that you've spoken to and what you've lived, what do you say to people? I mean, what an empty question. What a glib question. But really, I don't have another question. What do you say to people? How do you help people to move forward when they wake up one day and realize that that's them this time?
Well, for a start, we've got to realize, like Michelle and I set up a 12-step crisis-centered recovery program about 16 years ago called Recovery Road. It's still going, with this group's going all around the country and some in America and other places. The 12-step movement has a lot of the great steps obviously, to get through that process. The first step in the 12-step recovery program is accepting denial for what it is. The acronym for the word denial is "Don't even know I am lying."
Yeah.
And so, for the most part, we're saying we're okay. We wear a mask because we're scared if we admit that we're not okay, that we'll be taken advantage of. And
Yeah.
we're afraid of vulnerability. And for me, my strength lies in my vulnerability. Why do you think I told 7 million people who watched that first video that I had a porn addiction?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to be, my identity is in Christ. My name is Graham. My
Yeah.
identity is in Christ Jesus. And I struggle with this addiction, or I had struggled with this addiction. So the first thing we've got to do is accept that we need help. And the second thing we've got to do is tell people we need help. Now, if you are feeling down and you are worried about where you're at, you need to declare that to somebody. Now, there's the suicide stats in Australia are horrendously tilted against men. 4 times more men than women take their own lives in Australia, but 7 times more women than men actually talk about doing it but don't do it.
Yeah.
Why? Because they talk about doing it. Men don't. We bottle it up. And it's really, really important that we understand the value of being vulnerable. My strength lies in my vulnerability. For example, I've got a bit of a public face at the moment. If I hadn't declared my pornography addiction, anyone who knew I had it who wanted to hurt me could blurt out, "Oh,
Correct.
to pornography."
Correct.
Well, if somebody made a public statement, like some clown made a 45-minute video about my porn addiction, and I looked at it, and it was really sad from the point of view of my kids actually watched it, and that was really sad. They know about it.
Sure.
But it was, it was a horrible thing. This guy went to a lot of trouble to do this, and it was ridiculous. At the end of the day, though, I can say, well, yeah, duh, like everybody knows about that. What's to hide?
Yeah.
And you've only got to look at what happens in Australia when there's a bushfire on. If you're struggling to handle the situation you're in, everybody's busting their chops to help you. Everybody wants to come. We saw it in the floods. It wasn't the emergency services. It wasn't the SES. It wasn't the Red Cross. It wasn't the Salvation Army. It was your neighbours. They're the ones who came to your aid because they knew you needed help. Yeah. And that's the first step. We've got to step out of our denial. We've got to admit that we don't have every answer. We've got to admit that we get painted into a corner, and sometimes we have to call time out. Yeah. And by you saying what you just did, Topher, in asking the question, you actually gave permission to everyone who's watching this to say, you know what, I can relate to what Topher said, because anybody who's been through this in Australia in the last 2 years has either decided my way of coping with this is just to comply because I can't deal with it any other way. Those who've not complied, and I'm not judging anyone on whether they've complied or not. For me, that's your choice. Yeah. But for those who haven't, this has been an incredibly anxious moment in history. It's definitely been the most stressful time I've been through collectively in a nation. And we've got to acknowledge that that's going to affect us, and it's going to affect us in ways that are very subtle. It's going to creep up on us, and we need to acknowledge it for what it is and be real with each other. And that we still get back to, we have to start loving each other. James 5:16 says, confess your sins to God, yourself, and another human being, and pray for one another so that all may be healed. Yeah. We're all in the same, but we're all in battleground Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
And some people cope with it with alcohol. My go-to addiction was pornography. And whenever I was overly stressed or feeling alone, I needed my fix, my Band-Aid, if you like, for my dysfunction in my life was to go to porn. Because while I was watching porn, I wasn't connecting to the thoughts going in my own head. I was thinking about somebody else.
Well, what's important to realize is porn addiction, computer game addictions, etc. And people would be surprised that I put those in the same bracket. I absolutely do. What they are is endorphin addictions.
Yeah.
Right. That's actually what a porn addiction is. You're addicted to that instant gratification. You can go to a website or open a magazine and get instant gratification. and your brain pumps out all the right chemicals, and you feel good for a very short amount of time. Right?
Yep.
Now, what happens? Sorry.
Then you fall hard.
Then you fall hard. And what happens, of course, is because you've got this access to this instant gratification, your brain slowly desensitizes. The human body, the human brain is
dropped out again, Topher.
If you're exposed to lots of heat, you adjust to the heat over time, right? Your body is designed to get used to what it's exposed to. If you're exposing your body to enormous amounts of endorphins that haven't been earned, they haven't actually come as a result of actual effort and sacrifice and the things that the human body is meant to be rewarded for. They've come because you opened a website or you opened a book. Gradually, your sensitivity to those endorphins reduces. And that's why, as a general rule, the pathway for someone on pornography is to go to more and more extreme pornography, and to go towards more and more what would be considered depraved kinds of pornography over time, because they're looking for that endorphin hit that they just can't get from regular old boring pornography anymore. Their brain has desensitized itself to that. The same is true of computer games. People who get a computer game addiction, what they're actually addicted to is the instant sense of success. The gamification, you're instantly being awarded points or being awarded whatever. You can conquer that level. You can overcome that particular boss. And these are rewards that have no real meaning in the real world. And we're addicted to that sense of gratification that comes through that. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because I think we see the effect of that, where some people are having a very, very hard time dealing with the real world where rewards come hard. Real life endorphins have to be earned. The human body was designed that way. You want endorphins, you got to do something for them, right? And that's what pushes us to actually do work, because real life is work. You want to eat, it takes work. You want to have clothes, you want to have a house, you want to have a family with real relationships with each other. It takes work to achieve any of those things. Endorphins are supposed to come as a reward after work. That was the idea. And so you get these people that have grown up in and have been allowed to cultivate an environment around themselves of instant reward without any effort. And then they get exposed to the real world for the first time. And all of a sudden they're going, well, hang on, this can't be it. I've been doing this for 15 minutes now and I haven't had any endorphins at all. I haven't been rewarded yet. No one's rewarded me. I've been at this for half an hour now. And in computer game land, that works. In porn land, that works. In real life, it doesn't.
Well, what happens when kids are constantly being given award certificates and medals for doing absolutely nothing, because we don't want to offend the kids. The kids who earn it get it, and the kids who don't earn it feel dejected. So what happens in real life when they go out and they get a job and their boss says, hang on, you didn't do that right. You've just cost me a lot of money. How am I going to fix this problem? All of a sudden they cave in, they collapse.
Correct.
The thing about addiction, and this I know to be true, I've done a lot of work on it because I've had to overcome. The main driver of anxiety, depression, suicide, and addiction is a feeling of not being loved and being disconnected. I talked about that earlier. The way we treat people who are that way afflicted is normally to condemn them. But what we don't realize is, in condemning them and making them feeling more disconnected, we're actually driving them deeper into the pain that requires the addiction to be the Band-Aid to fix. So, for example, and I'm going to be vulnerable here. I'm going to be upfront. I'm going to give the trolls some playground here. But enjoy, guys. I
hope you've stuck around, trolls.
Yeah. It was about 10 years ago, I think. It was 2012, I think it was. Yeah, 2012. We just had a wonderful holiday. Michelle and I had the best holiday we'd ever had in our lives. And when it was over, I went back to work. I was on a 4-day trip, and for some reason I stumbled for 2 hours and watched pornography, and hadn't watched it for a long time, and since I'd met Michelle, and everything was going well. Anyhow, oh man, I felt terrible. I thought, gee, I thought I'd overcome this, and what happened was I got home, and about 6 weeks carrying the burden had gone, and there was a phone call with somebody I was helping to overcome an addiction, And this person said to me, you've helped me so much. I can't believe it. And Michelle heard the conversation. And Michelle said to me when the lady had finished talking to me, she said, you see, she said to me, that's why you're my hero.
Wow.
How do you think I felt? Because I had a secret. I had stumbled and she didn't know about it because I didn't want to tell her. Because on this shoulder, there was a little voice saying, don't tell her. You don't need to tell her. It's not like you're having an affair or anything. You don't have to tell her. And the other voice on the other side was saying, you know what you've got to do.
Yeah.
And so when she looked at me and she said, that's why you're my hero, I said, honey, I am no hero. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I've got something to tell you that may destroy our relationship. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, look, I hate what I'm about to tell you, but I need to tell you that 6 weeks ago when I had that 4-day trip and I was in Adelaide, I stumbled for 2 hours and I watched pornography. Now, the little voice on this shoulder that was saying, you know, she's going to go off the deep end. She'll say, how can I ever trust you again? Our marriage is over. I'll never believe another word that comes out of your mouth. They're all the human things I was expecting to hear. But when I said that to her, she looked at me and she said, are you okay?
Wow.
And I said, no, honey, I'm not. I feel lower than a snake's belly in a gutter at the moment. She said, was it anything I did? And I said, no, darling, it wasn't anything that you did. I've had this problem since I was a 12-year-old boy. And every man with a porn addiction knows this to be true. It's always when you're going into puberty. And then she said the clincher that brought me undone. She looked me straight in the eye and she said, darling, what can I do to help you? Now, the minute she said that, I saw the face of Jesus because that's how Jesus treats us. So she gave me a Jesus response and I was expecting her to give me a human response, which would have been, how can I trust you? Now, if she'd given me the human response, I would have felt even lower and it would have driven me deeper into the pain that would require the Band-Aid fix of going back to pornography. But in doing what she did, she elevated me out of it. We have to find a way to love people out of their addiction. And the best way to do that is not take responsibility for it ourselves. It's not our fault that they're there. And it may not be their fault either. If we understand that every behavior that we find abhorrent is normally founded in a pain that we know nothing about, it makes it easier for us to forgive the person who's behaving badly.
Sure.
So that's the way I look at it each time. And so the best way to overcome that is to actually say, well, that person who's behaving badly must be in a lot of pain that I don't know about. And therefore I need to love them because I need to love them out of their pain because their pain is driven. Every single emotional pain is driven by the feeling of not being loved and being disconnected and condemned. That's it. Everybody in prison will tell you the same thing. Every single person in prison feels disconnected.
Sure.
That doesn't mean people don't have to pay a price for action. We all have a responsibility to pay a penalty, and God makes that very clear. We have to be responsible for our actions. But by the same token, we need to, once the penalty's paid, we need to love people back. And that's not always easy. But if you don't do it that way, Topher, you're a prisoner of your own lack of grace. Grace is what sets us free.
Yeah. Well, the lack of grace is on full display in the comments that I'm not putting up. And it's one of the things that really does sort of catch my eye with the trolls that you attract, that I attract, with I would say a lot of the woke movement is that it is completely devoid of grace. There is no forgiveness. Once you are something, you will always be that thing. There is no overcoming. There is no hope. There is no redemption in their world.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that play out for those of you that are watching the YouTube comments, especially, but to a lesser degree, the Facebook comments as well. We're seeing this gracelessness, this just harsh, judgmental attitude just playing out in the comments here. I'm not going to stick them up. But Steve has provided us with a wonderful counterpoint to this, because this is what Christmas is about. What a friend we have in Jesus. He knows all our faults and transgressions, and yet he still loves us.
Yep.
And he actually made the sacrifice of dying on the cross so that we could have the forgiveness of those very sins, those very faults and transgressions, that other humans that have their own faults and transgressions will not extend any grace. But God himself, God made flesh, extended that grace to us. And that's what Christmas is about. And Hoody, I know that you're a man of faith.
You dropped out again, mate.
There we go. Okay, how are we doing?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. You're back.
All right. So what I was just saying was for those who aren't believers, or I know there's a lot of people right now, and listen up if I'm describing you right now, where you wouldn't consider yourself to be a believer, but somehow, as a result of the last 2.5 years, you're no longer an unbeliever. You no longer believe that there isn't a God, but you're not quite sure what you believe. And I know there's a lot of you out there because I talk to you, I was about to say every single day. I used to talk to you every single day. These days, it's probably every single week. I'm finding myself having a conversation with someone who's in that position. What is Jesus? And what is the significance of Jesus coming to earth?
Well, for a start, let me just first address what you said about the comments that you're getting, the hateful ones at the moment. What I've found is, and I've said this in churches when I preached, that if you think harshly of me for my testimony, then whatever it is causing you to think harshly of me for my testimony is God shining a spotlight on a defect in your character that he wants you to look at.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. Honestly, it is, because whatever I've admitted to openly is pushing your buttons. And so life is a journey of character development. So you need to consider that. I'll say that again. God is shedding a light on a defect in your character in the way you're judging me for being honest. Okay.
I agree.
Can you revisit the question again, the second one?
So for those people who are, for the first time in their lives, many of them, open to the idea of faith, but they don't know what they believe. They no longer believe that there isn't a God, but they don't know what they believe about God. Who is Jesus?
Oh, well,
why is this such a special time of year?
Well, for a start, I have to talk about what I say to people who I'm about to baptize. The first thing I do is ask them, what do they know about Jesus? What do they know? What do they know about God? How do they see God? Most people have this picture of God as a dictatorial, condemning judge who can't wait to, pin their sins on them and bash the daylights out of them when the time comes. Most people connect religion with God, and religion and God are two different things in my book. I think religion is the business of God conducted by men, and they're very bad at it. And I think we have to disconnect our view of God from the filter of religion and look at it through the filter of Jesus. So I say to people, who is God? And they say a punishing dictator. Basically, that's how they see him.
Sure.
Then I go to James, 1 John 4:8, where I talk about, God is love.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, God is, the Bible tells us, I think 70 times that God is love. So that we were created to love and be loved by God and each other. So I say, if God is love, then what's the description of God's character? So I get them to go to 1 Corinthians 13. Okay. Most people will have heard that when they go to a wedding. Love is patient, love is kind, love keeps no track of wrongs, da-da-da-da-da. I say to them, that's a description of what love is. So if God is love, then that's a description of God. So read that again, but instead of using the word love, use the word God. God is patient, God is kind, God keeps no track of wrongs, da-da-da-da-da. And they go, all of a sudden, it just changes their perspective from the religious characterization of God, which frightens people away from a relationship with Jesus, to this real holistic, he is my father. He loves me, and he loves me enough to be tough with me when he needs to be. Then I say to them, right, so that's who God really is. How does that sound to you? And they go, wow, who wouldn't want to be in a relationship with him? And then I say, right, so God requires of us certain behaviors. So how do we achieve those behaviors? Well, I say Jesus tells us how in Matthew 5, the Beatitudes. So let's go and unpack the Beatitudes. The first thing I notice about the Beatitudes, and for those who don't know, the Beatitudes is one of the greatest, it's the greatest sermon ever delivered by Jesus on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount. And he says things like, blessed to those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed to those who know they are spiritually poor. For those, and there's this list of about 10 different characterizations. The first thing I notice about the Beatitudes is it goes back to what you said earlier. Before you get the gratification, the endorphin, you've got to do the deed.
Yeah.
Blessed are those who seek righteous, blessed are those who hunger for righteousness, for they shall be filled. First, you've got to hunger for the righteousness, then you'll be filled.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing about the Beatitudes. And when you look at the Beatitudes, what Jesus is saying, if you live your life with humility, with sincerity, with courage, with strength, with a willingness to learn, all these different characteristics, you actually live the way I designed you to live.
Sure.
And then I go to the 10 Commandments and I say to them, let's look at Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments. The first 4 are about loving God. And even the 4th commandment, which is why I'm a Sabbath keeper, it's the only commandment God says, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. It's the only one he said to remember. So I keep the Sabbath because he said to remember it. So the first 4 are about loving God. The last 6 are about loving each other. And even Jesus said, when he was questioned by the Sadducees, I think it was, if you're the Son of God, which are the most important laws? They were trying to nail him. And he said, well, there's really only 2. The first one is to love the Lord your God with everything you got. And the second one is to love your neighbour as you love yourself.
Yeah.
When you do that, you encompass all 10. So if the laws of God were designed to punish and condemn you because they were a litigious law, then most people would be afraid of them.
Yeah.
But let's say they were a design law. Let's say like the law of gravity. Let's say the 10 Commandments are like the first few pages in the manual of your new car. If you operate this car in accordance with these 10 basic rules, your car will function beautifully as designed.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if God's law is actually a design law like the law of gravity or the law of health?
Everyone who's tuned out, tune back in, because this is it right here. What if it's a design law, not a litigious law? Exactly.
That's it. Now, it depends whether we're looking at, and I'm referring to some, I haven't come up with this stuff. I've been watching a guy who's been talking about this. I won't mention his name. But if we look at the 10 Commandments through the imperial law lens, which is the Roman law lens, which requires a judge, requires condemnation and a punishment, then the 10 Commandments are horrendous. But the 10 Commandments are actually a picture of what sin looks like. And if we want to live the way we were designed by our Maker, and we try to live without sin, we apply the principles of love, 1 Corinthians 13. We apply the principles of how to be a good person, the recipe to be a good person in Matthew 5, the Beatitudes. And we see the 10 Commandments, which we've all thought of as, how can I ever meet those? As an indication of what sin looks like and a way to develop our character. Because it's a design law. If I live without, let's look at the last 6, for example, honor your mother and your father, don't commit adultery, don't murder. I'm not getting them all in order. All those things express a dissatisfaction in your life.
Yeah.
And God wants us to be satisfied with what we've got. So when you covet your neighbour's goods, when you covet your neighbour's wife, all that sort of stuff, it's saying, I'm not happy with my goods. I'm not happy with my wife. So how can you live a life of serenity and peace and compassion when you're dissatisfied with everything that's going on?
Yeah.
So if people get a basic grip of the Bible, the way I've just described it, and they can develop a relationship with Jesus based on those principles, then they're starting a journey. And that's when I'm happy to baptize them. I'm happy to say, right, I'm going to baptize you now because inside every one of us there's 2 people and one of them needs to drown, not both of them. One of them needs to drown. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through a process to give you a fresh start, to start you on a relationship with Christ that will make even empty Christmases in the physical sense be easy to bear. And that's and look, if I'm wrong, look, I'll say what I've said at several speeches. I flew with a guy once who said to me, "You're a born-again Christian, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How can you believe in that rubbish?" And I said, "Well, I choose to. You believe in a big bang.
Yeah.
To me, that's crazy. I believe in creation. I choose to believe that. It makes sense to me. And then I say to him, let me tell you what I think you believe in. You believe you evolved from slime, your life has no purpose, and when you die, you're going to be worm tucker. And he said, yep, you got it. I said, well, I believe I was created by someone who loves me. My life has a purpose, and when I die, I'm going to go to heaven. He said, yeah, I get that. I said, who's going to have a better day, you or me? He said, he let out an F-bomb and he just hit his head like that. And he said, what? And I said, and let's imagine we're standing together at the end of time. Let's forget, for example, that the Bible is the most published book on the planet. Yep. But it's like Shakespeare. It's hard to read, but everybody's got one. And let's forget, for example, that God is God. Let's forget that this has got nothing to do with God. If you could stand with me at the end of time and say, see, I told you, Hoody. I told you there was no God. Well, I'd look at you and say, well, far out, blow me down. But boy, I've had a good life.
Yeah. See, this is the thing that amazes me, right? Now, I don't believe in works for the sake of works. I think good works have to be on a basis of faith. I'm not saying that you can be saved by works, but that your faith should lead to an expression that is visible in the form of works. But if you genuinely believe that there is nothing after death, then what you're saying is it does not matter whether you have fun in life or not. People say, oh, I don't think about the after. I don't think about God. I just want to have fun. Why? What value does fun have if it dies with you? What possible reason would you have for valuing fun? It is empty. It is ephemeral. It is gone the moment you are gone. And even once it ends, you only have a memory of it. You have fun at 20 years of age. Good for you. You lived to 80. Great. You got 60 years of memories of that time you had that fun. Great. What purpose is that? What value is that? In what way is that actually a value worth living for? It's not, right? So if you line up my life where I am very imperfectly, I'll be very, very clear. I'm imperfectly trying to live to a higher calling where I actually make a difference.
Yep.
Where people's lives are better because I lived than they would have been if I hadn't been here at the time, right? That's what I'm trying to achieve. And I'm trying to achieve that because that's what I believe I'm called to do by the God that I serve, right?
Yep.
And we line that up against your life. What you believe is that neither of our lives will matter in the end. What you believe is that what you believe won't matter. What I believe is that what we believe about God is the single most important decision we will make. Now, what that means is that even if you're right, I still can't be wrong. Because at worst, my belief in God doesn't matter. But if you're wrong, you lose everything, right? You cannot win. If you take that side of this equation, you cannot win because you must accept that even your fun that you think you're having is meaningless. And only if you're wrong and I'm right does life have any meaning at all. I can't see any other way through that.
I don't see how you lose with faith. Look, you may lose some friends. Like when I became a Christian, I lost a few friends because, even my dad said to me at one stage, you're going to become a Bible bashing wowser. And yet my dad accepted Christ just a month before he died.
Oh, wow.
Now he did that because when I told my dad I was going to become a Christian, he said, no way, please don't do that. And we had an argument over it. And I vowed and declared I'd never open a Bible in front of my dad. But there was a time a month before he died when he was on the veranda of our home. I used to get him out of the nursing home every Friday. And while I was doing landscaping, he'd sit up there and look at me and give me a thumbs up. And I wanted him to be part of it. And every couple of hours, I'd take him for a walk around the veranda of the house. And every time I walked past the kitchen window where Michelle was making us a cup of tea, I always made a point of leaning down and saying to him, I really love you, Dad. And he'd say, I really love you too, son. Anyhow, one day he said to me, listen, sit down with me for a minute. And this was several years after about 8 years after I became a Christian. And he sat down with me and he said, remember that time you blew up that boat? And I said, yeah. He said, remember that time you pranged up that car that you bought that I lent you the money for? And I said, yeah. He said, remember how you haven't paid me back? And I said, yeah. And then he said to me, do you remember that day I come home drunk and I abused your mother? I said, yep. And he mentioned a couple of other things. And he said to me, I said to him, what are you doing? He said, I don't know. I said, are you reliving your life in slow motion replay? He said, maybe. Why? I said, well, you're trying to tick all the boxes before you die. And he said, I haven't got enough time left to do that, son. But he said, there's one thing I've got to do for you. He said, I've got to tell you something. And he said to me, you are 10 times better a man and 10 times better a father than I ever was. And he pointed to the sky and he said, I thank God for that. Not,
Right.
thank God. I thank God for that. And I said, whoa, hang on a minute. I said, are you telling me that you have accepted God and Jesus? And he said, based on what I've seen in you, I figure there must be a God. And I said,
Wow.
are you prepared to accept Jesus? And he said, I am. And I laughed. And he said, what are you laughing at? I said, I've just had a beautiful vision. It brings me joy. And he said, what's that? I said, well, when you do die, you go to sleep. The next time you wake up, you and I will be fit, strapping young Anzac-looking dudes together forever in eternity, surrounded by the most beautiful souls. We'll never be hungry. We'll never be pained. We'll always look at the peak of perfection, and we'll have that for eternity. And he said, it's a date. And my dad accepted Jesus that day. Now, he accepted Jesus because he saw me living out the Bible. I never opened the Bible in front of him. He saw Christ change my life, and he liked what he saw because he wasn't happy with what he was seeing before that. So then the call came a month later when we had to go to his we had to go to the nursing home that we were told that he was about to die, and we raced like crazy, Michelle and I, to get there. And we ran down the hallway and we stood in the doorway of his bedroom. And I stood, and I'll never forget the view. He was lying under a sheet. It was a really hot day. His mouth was moving like a goldfish, and he was looking at the ceiling. And his eyes were fixed at the ceiling. And sitting next to him was my stepmom and a nurse. And the nurse said to me, your two ladies lapsed into a coma. He won't know you're here. And Michelle said, he'll know you're here. And when he heard my voice, I saw his eyes flicker towards the door where I was standing. And I went over to him and I looked down at him, and I could see the fear in his eyes. And I got right up close to him and I said, you're afraid, aren't you, mate? And he blinked at me, and he had piercing blue eyes. And I brushed the snowy white hair off his forehead, and his skin felt like cold porcelain. It was weird. And I said, don't worry. Don't forget what I told you. Don't forget what I told you. One more sleep, Dad. And when you wake up, remember that beautiful promise. And I said, I want you to know something before you die. I want you to know that being your son has been a real privilege, a real honor. I love the things that you've taught me, and I will never forget you, and I will always love you. And with that, the man in the coma, his whole body trembled, Topher, and his right arm came up like this, and he put his hand on my face, and he held it there for 10 seconds. And then he died. Now, with that one movement, my father told me that every time he told me that he loved me when I was a kid, he meant it, because I always doubted. And this is what I learned, and it's a valuable lesson, and we've all got to hang on to this, especially those who are judging me for what I said earlier. Please hang on to this. We as young men coming out of puberty need our fathers or well-mentored, structured men to validate us, to tick our box so that we can complete the journey from boyhood to manhood. In other words, we need them to tell us that we've got everything we need to be a good man. And the circle of manhood means that they need us at the end of their lives to tell them that they were good men. And without that, death becomes a horror. But if you can go to your grave knowing in your heart that you have been a good man, everybody wins. And my father taught me so much. I made it by that much. And that wouldn't have happened without the intervention of Christ, because a lot of men I've spoken to about this in the tour have come up to me wet-faced because they feel like they've missed that. So we really need to understand that as men. We need to understand that as a community, and we need to understand that about Christ. Christ is the last person in the universe that we should be cancelling right now. We shouldn't be cancelling Christ. Not now. We need him more now than ever, and especially at this time of remembrance and festivity and whatever it is. But he came, he saw, he conquered.
Yeah. This is, I think, you know, I reflected earlier, you know, I had some pretty low times earlier this year. And I think it's almost like a cheat. It's like a cheat code in a game where you can just type in a code and you've got this unfair advantage. There is an unfair advantage when you have faith, because it gives you a perspective on something that transcends this temporary life that we live. And it gives you a set of values and shows you what's important, that gives you a completely different perspective through which to see the world. We know from scripture that, you know, God doesn't choose what the world would consider to be the wise, the powerful, the rich, the pretty. You know, we know from scripture that Jesus himself was not a particularly attractive person. He was not an especially good-looking person. He just looked very, very average. The Bible took the time to tell us that. There is a verse dedicated to the purpose of telling us that Jesus was not particularly good looking. I'm sorry, but all of the Jesus movies have been lying to you. He didn't look that good, right?
But we were created in his image, thank God.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And real life, unfortunately, has its real ups and downs. And earlier this year gave me a perspective. I don't think I've ever had genuine depression. When I hear people talk about what the experience of depression is, it seems to me to be on an entirely other level. But I would say I was definitely in the grip of very severe anxiety. I think that's a fair description of where I was at, which at times dipped into depression. Okay, never for long, but at times dipped into that real, you know, depressed purposelessness, listlessness, inability to focus, to get anything done, inability to get out of bed on some days. There were, you know, it was, every day was different, but there were some definite ups and downs in there. But there was always this underlying faith that never left me, that God is in charge. And yes, life sucks because we live in a fallen world where sin reigns for the time being. Sin has been, you know, and Satan is the prince of this earth for a time. He loses in the end, but he has his time, and we're in that time now.
Spoiler alert. You should have said spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, Satan loses, Jesus wins. You know, and so sometimes it can be very easy for us to get completely caught up on the problems that we face, and the problems are real. Okay, I'm not trying to diminish those at all. The problems are real. But with faith comes this assurance, comes this optimism that even in my darkest times never actually left me. That fundamental underlying, if I just get through another day, then there's another day. And you know, God is good, and I know who wins in the end. And okay, my life doesn't look like a Hallmark card right now. You know, it's you know, I'm not living a Disney life right now, but that's okay. Well, no, that's right. These days, but it's just this added layer of just, I don't know. For me, my experience, and I'm not saying this has to be everyone's experience, but my experience of it was this: that faith almost created a floor through which I couldn't drop into that true despair that I know some people experience. It created this layer where, okay, yes, you know, my human condition would allow me to get to here, but there was something about that underlying faith that, you know what, okay, but God's in control. And that then meant that I couldn't drop below that point. I'd stay here, and then I'd pick up again, and then I'd come back here, and then I'd pick up again. But there was just something there that I couldn't drop below. And I almost just feel like it's like a cheat code with life, to have that faith as your underpinning value.
I've got a picture I want to paint for you.
Sure.
When Christ died on the cross, he justified us before the Father. In other words, he said, I'm vouching for Topher. I'm vouching for Hoody.
Yeah.
If we accept him, right? That's justification. Justification is, if you've ever seen a North Sea oil rig, justification is the platform on which the rig stands. Now, it has long concrete piles that sit on the seabed. It's designed to withstand all the storms and gales, to provide a level, stable platform for the derrick, the oil rig on top, to pump and drill. That's what Christ gave us at the cross. He gave us the platform, that floor that you talk about, that you keep skipping off. That's a justification of Christ that you believe in, that holds you steady through all the storms of life. And from there, you can actually do the work based on the justification of Christ who died on the cross for you. You can do the work on that stable platform, which is him. And occasionally you'll stuff it up. Occasionally you'll drop a spanner over the side. But you've still got that platform, and you can't sink below that. As long as you still have a belief in Christ, you won't go below that.
Yeah. Yeah. I reflect a lot on there's a lot of different Bible verses that talk about joy, that talk about healing, that talk about what the relationship with God is like. And unfortunately, a lot of those Bible verses get very much misrepresented. And you'd be as aware as I am, Hoody, of people who prosperity doctrine preachers, or people who want to, bang on about how, oh, if you just believe in God, then you'll have lots of money and lots of prosperity and every opportunity, and life's going to be easy. And if it isn't, then clearly it's your fault because you don't have enough faith. Look at me, I'm flying a private jet. Like, there's this whole industry that's built around manipulating Bible verses for the purpose of ripping people off.
Yep.
But there's a verse that I go back to often that, in my opinion, this is the one that we should be, this is the litmus test for the interpretation of all of the others. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Now, what I find fascinating about that is, why do you need strength to get through hard times? You don't need strength to do easy things. No. You need strength to do hard things.
Yep.
So why would it be important that the joy of the Lord is your strength? So that you can do hard things.
Yep.
So that you can go through hard times.
Yep.
And this is what I think is missed so much in so much Christian teaching now. Being a Christian is going to involve very, very difficult times, because we still live in the same fallen world. We are still under the consequences of the same sin nature that is infected the world and affected everything since creation. And we're not magically immune. This prosperity doctrine stuff is rubbish. We are not magically immune. But even through the hard times, we can still have joy. And this was the challenge that came to me from one of my pastors. It took me a long time to actually go and seek help, a lot longer than what it should have. But I did finally acknowledge that I needed some help. I needed some counseling. And I spoke to one of my pastors at my church who I've got a very good relationship with. He was very gracious, and he prayed with me, and he put me in touch with a counselor. And that's been a part of my journey since. But one of the things that he said to me was, he pointed out the verse about how my burden, Christ's burden, this is Christ speaking, my burden is easy. My yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Yep.
Right. Now, he said that in the context of still having to face real life. People make the mistake of saying, well, his yoke is easy, his burden is light, therefore you're going to have nothing but good times. No.
Yep.
You can be going through hell and still not be carrying the heavy burden. And this is what I'd missed. This is where I'd made a mistake and sort of lost my focus on really what the promises of God were, because I looked at the world and went, this is shit. And there are so many things about my life that I can legitimately look at and go, this is really, really shit. And I took that on as a burden, because I didn't go, this is shit, right? The life is exactly the same. But in Christ, I am more than a conqueror. In Christ, I have a hope and a future. And all of the promises of God are yes and amen.
Yep.
And standing on those scriptures, and even just saying it now, like I can feel it in myself. Like it's just standing on scripture changes everything, even though it doesn't actually change anything, if that makes sense. It doesn't change the circumstances that you're in, but it changes the yoke and the burden that you carry.
Yep.
And what I realized was the reason I got as low as I did, which, like I said, it was like there was a floor that I couldn't go through. But the reason I even got as low as I did was because I had actually neglected myself, my Bible reading, my praying, my faith. And I hadn't actually been actively feeding my own spirit and actually been actively feeding my own spiritual walk during that time.
Yeah.
And that had made it very easy for life and for circumstances to get on top of me. And I reflect and I wonder how often in life are we sitting there going, God, why have you abandoned me? God, why have you given me such a trial? When actually, if we just got the basics right, like we just did the basic stuff, God gave us his word. Are we reading it? Are we memorizing it? Are we living in it? Are we letting it change us, renew us? The mind is renewed by the washing of the water of the word of God. That doesn't happen if you're not in the word of God. Are we praying? Are we communicating with God? These aren't panaceas. These don't instantly fix your problems. But what they allow you to do is to tap into the joy of the Lord being your strength in spite of the circumstances. It allows you to actually have that confidence that creates the ability to act in faith in spite of your circumstances. And that, I realize now, was the mistake. That's what I got wrong. That allowed me to fall as low as I did. Now, I'm not saying there wouldn't have been hard times. The circumstances would have been identical. The hard times would have come just exactly the same as they did.
Yeah, and the beauty of it all is a lot of people pray so that Jesus will give them what they want without understanding that what he's going to give them is what they need.
Yeah.
Now, it's the hard times that give us the wisdom to grow and to work on the defects of our character. If character development is the work of a lifetime, it has to come with hard times.
Yes.
It has to. You cannot get character development without having to test your character. So, for example, I'll give you a very quick and easy to remember example. I said earlier, my strength lies in my vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I then went on to talk about my addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went on to talk about when I fell and told my wife about it.
Yeah.
And before I was about to say that, I'm thinking into my mind, if I say this, I'm going to unleash the trolls.
Sure.
And I did. But if I didn't say it, it would have been a blemish on my character, because I can't say your strength lies in your vulnerability and then not be honest. Because why did I admit those things? Because there might be somebody watching who the light will turn on for.
Yep.
That will abide by the things that I talked about to get help and or to get better.
Yep.
So once again, I made myself vulnerable, knowing that I could be hated and be the victim of trash.
Sure.
Trash talking, not trash people, trash talking.
Mm.
But not to do it would have been, to my mind, would have been an affront to my character. So this is what this journey is all about.
Yeah.
I'm happy to run that risk, because I know that what I need is Christ to develop my character, not give me a new car.
Yeah, that's right.
That's it.
That's right. And I feel sorry for the people that think that the private jet and the Bentley, I'm thinking particularly of the American style prosperity gospel preachers, right? That they think that is where their relationship with God is at. And I actually feel sorry for them, because I look at them and I go, if that's all you're getting out of your relationship with God, then you're missing out. Now, would I like a private jet? Sure. Would I like a Bentley? Yeah. One day before I die, I'd love to drive a Bentley. It'd be great. I think it'd be a great experience, right? Of course, it'd be great. I'm not gonna shy away from that. I'm fascinated to know how one of those drives. Does it really feel like it's 10 times more, actually more, like 50 times more expensive than the Volkswagen I drive? Does it feel like that? I don't know. I'd love to find out.
You want me to tell you?
Sure, if you drive a Bentley.
I've driven a Bentley.
Okay. Does it really feel like it's a 10 times more expensive car?
Let me tell you a story.
Sure.
Let me tell you a story that is going to rock your socks off.
Sure.
I mean, it's ironic that you even mentioned this.
Okay.
I went to a small rally on one of the tours. I won't say where.
Sure.
I won't mention names.
Yep.
And as I was speaking at the rally, a lovely lady came up to Michelle and said, I want to give you and Graham a gift. And we normally get a jar of honey or a box of Anzac cookies, which we love, but my waist,
great. Yeah.
It's great.
Yep.
And she told Michelle what the gift was. And Michelle said, what? Are you serious? And she said, I'm deadly serious. And she said, I can't tell Hoody that. You'll have to write that down. So the lady wrote it on a piece of paper and gave it to Michelle. And when the rally was over, I got in the car and Michelle said, how are you? You okay? And I said, yeah. She said, a lady wants to give you a present. And I said, yeah, what? She said, here, read this piece of paper. I opened up the piece of the paper and the gift she was giving me was a 2007 Bentley Silver Spur with 97,000 kilometres on the clock, hand-stitched red leather upholstery, heated vibrating seats, a refrigerated bar in the back, and a W12 engine. And she said, I want you to have it. And there was a phone number on there, and I thought, this is a joke. It'll be a little dinky thing. And I rang the lady up, lovely lady. And I said to her, are you serious? And she said, I'm deadly serious. She said, come round to my place tomorrow for lunch. Gave me the address. Come round to my place tomorrow for lunch and you can take it for a drive. So we go around and we think there's a catch somewhere. So
yeah, there's got to be. There's got to be.
And there sitting in the garage is this beautiful Bentley under a cover. Now, when she took the cover off, it was pristine. I mean, when that car was new, it was $340,000. It's a kind of car Klaus Schwab drives, probably.
Yeah.
And
or Klaus Schwab has somebody else drive with him in the back.
That's right. So she said, do you want to take it for a drive? And I said, well, who wouldn't want to go for a drive in a Bentley? I, like you, would love to have seen. Is it really? So she drove away and then she pulled up on this country road. She said, you get in and you drive. And I got in and it felt unbelievable. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you only had to look at the accelerator and you were at 150 kilometers an hour. and it was unbelievable. It just floated on air. It was the most amazing experience. And I drove it back to her house and we parked it. We got out of the car and she showed me how a few things worked. And she said, do you like it? And I said, who wouldn't like it? And she said, well, come around tomorrow for lunch again, and I'll have the transfer papers made out for you. It even had a sterling silver box with blue velvet. Inside the box were 4 sterling silver valve caps to replace the ones that always get stolen. It's got sterling silver valve caps on it. I mean, ridiculous. But anyhow, she said, and she was deadly serious. She said, this car's yours. And I thought, what do I do with that? So we went back to our caravan and we slept that night. I didn't sleep. And the next morning I woke up and Michelle said, you didn't sleep. And I said, no, I didn't. And she said, what are you thinking about? I said, I can't take that car. No way in the world can I take that car.
No, that's you're exactly right.
And anyhow, we went around to have lunch with her and we turned up and she had the key on the key of the car was sitting on the transfer papers with the sterling silver box with the valve caps in it. And even the key to buy another key is $2,500. And if you've got to get new tyres fitted, you've got to get them from England, right? Anyhow, she said to me, there it is, just sign there. And I said, I don't want to offend you, but I can't accept this gift. And she said, why not? I said, why do you care enough about us to give me this car? She said, because you're a man of integrity. I said, that's why I can't take it. That's why I can't take it. And I said to her, the greatest gift that you gave me was A, that you even wanted to give me such a beautiful car, and B, that you allowed me to drive it, even if only for 5 minutes. I've always wanted to drive one to see what it was like.
Mm.
And then I thought, imagine if I turned up at a rally in a Bentley. Oh,
Oh,
boy.
oh.
Wouldn't they have a ball with that?
Wouldn't
And
that?
then
They have a field day with that. I'm loving. So Barry, Barry Rogue, the Night Rider. He's a perennial troll of mine. He adds a huge number of comments into YouTube, which obviously feeds the algorithm. So I enjoy him hanging around.
Yeah.
But he's one of his favorite subjects. He bangs on about this thing called the network. Barry, if you could introduce me to whoever runs this apparent network that I'm supposedly a member of, I would really appreciate that, because from everything you describe, apparently they have a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of influence, and I'd love to be connected with them. So if you could make that introduction, and look, just CC Hoody into the email as well. Why not? That'd be really, really great. No, as you were telling the story, I was just like, that's a real bind. How, you can't say, you can't show up, or you can't have in the background of some photo that you put online in 2 years' time a Bentley Silver Spur.
Well, we took photos of it, obviously, and me sitting in it. Of course we did. And the lady suggested, look, you just take it and sell it. And I said, I can't even afford to have my name associated in the paperwork with a car like this. I can't.
Yeah.
I said, I love you so much for thinking that way. She said, I just want you and Michelle to have some luxury. I said, we've got everything we need in Christ. And so, she's a dear friend still. And we love her dearly. And the gesture was amazing. But that's what I'm talking about. And I've not regretted for 1 minute, Topher, that I didn't take it. Yeah. I'm not regretting it for a minute. And neither does Michelle. Yeah. And so it's, there's no, let's get real about this. There's no tow bars on hearses. You don't take it with you when you're gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And driving a Bentley on New South Wales country roads would be a disastrous thing to do to a Bentley anyway. But nevertheless, I mean, it was amazing how you happened to mention that particular car and how it segued into that story. It's really what we're all about anyway. Now, as to who was Night Rider talking about the network, where was I 3 years ago? Night Rider, I was flying around in a 737, and I was believing in the government, and I was pretty much rolling along. I was doing all the things I thought the government expected me to do and what society expected me to do. I was paying my taxes. I was abiding by the laws. I broke a few speeding tickets. I got a few speeding tickets. I was spending all of my life helping people because I believe the only time we look down on people is when we're helping them up. They were the things I was involved with while you were worrying about the network. So, that's where I was, Night Rider, and I don't know what the network is. I haven't worked that out yet, but I'm just doing the best I can. Like Topher, we're just doing the best we can. And thanks for watching, mate.
Yeah, I've apparently over the years I've gotten money apparently, so they tell me, from big oil, from the climate change denial lobby. I'm not exactly sure what their postal address is. If anyone can find this climate change denial lobby, that'd be great. I'd love to talk to them. Can I share with you my version of that story? I'm not trying to play the one-upmanship game. Please don't interpret it that way. But I've got my own sort of story that
not a lead yet.
No. Although I flew in one that day. So you're familiar with who Dick Smith is?
Yeah.
Right. So the year is, I'm going to say 2013, maybe 2014. I'm new to YouTube still. I've been going 4 or 5 years. I've done a bunch of different videos on a bunch of different topics. I get an email, and it's this person saying, "Hey, it's Dick Smith. I'd like to talk to you on the phone." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, righto." Give him my phone number, because back then I used to hand it out. I don't anymore, obviously. And the phone rings, and I answer it, and it's Dick Smith. And I'm like, that voice is it's a unique voice. This is either someone who's really put some work into being an impersonator, or this is the real Dick Smith. And he says, "Oh, Topher, love your work, been watching your videos, blah, blah, blah. Have you heard of the Wilberforce Award?" I said, "No, mate, I've never heard of it." He said, "Okay. So this is an award that I'm offering, Dick Smith is offering $1 million to someone under 30 years of age who is willing to be the face of his campaign against a big Australia." Right? So a big Australia was his big issue back then. It still is to a certain degree, but he is not as active on it now. So he was warning against a big Australia. We needed to keep Australia's population low, etc. And he said, I'm offering $1 million to anyone 30 years or under, and I was 30 at the time. So actually, that tells me when it was. It must have been 2012. That must have been when it was, because I was 30 at the time. He said, I think you're my man. I think you can communicate. I think you can get this message across in a way that I can't. People are ignoring me. I'm just some old rich dude. Will you be my guy? And I said, there's only one problem. I think you're incorrect about your aversion to a big Australia. But I tell you what, if there's $1 million on the line, I'm happy to have a chat with you about it. I'm happy to continue the conversation and give you a chance to convince me that I'm the one who's wrong and not you. He was incredibly gracious. He booked me a ticket, flew me up to Sydney. I jumped in a limousine from Sydney Airport to Bankstown Airport, where we jumped in his private jet. We flew in his private jet. He flew the jet out to some country town in New South Wales where he'd made a prior arrangement. He was the guest of honor at a town fair type of thing. He did his duties. A couple of hours there, I kind of walked around feeling like a fish out of water. And then we jumped on the plane and flew back. And this time he sat in the back with me. And it was about an hour and a bit flying time. And we were locked in conversation of him trying to convince me that he was right about the big Australia problem, and therefore convince me to accept $1 million. Right? Those two issues were intrinsically intertwined. Okay, if he could convince me that big Australia was a problem, then he would convince me to accept $1 million. And I was on the other side making the argument that big Australia isn't a big problem, and that our population could grow massively from where it is, and it would not be some sort of Malthusian existential crisis for humanity. And therefore, I was arguing that I shouldn't accept the $1 million. And in the end, it became evident, by the time we landed, it became evident that neither of us was going to budge in our position. None of what he presented to me. I'd read his book. I'd watched his documentary. I went through a bunch of other stuff in preparation for this meeting. And I was confident and comfortable that there were flaws in his arguments that were fatal to his arguments. And he was not correct about the dangers of a big Australia. So there I was, arguing with a multimillionaire seated in the back of his jet and trying to convince him not to give me $1 million. And Dick Smith, I have massive respect for, because he turned around and said, okay, you know what? Let's just give up on this, because it's not going to happen. And then we just started talking. We landed in Bankstown Airport. I'm expecting to get bundled off in a limo back to Sydney Airport. My flight back to Melbourne wasn't till late at night, but I was expecting him to just basically get rid of me. Okay, he didn't. He said, "Have you ever been in a helicopter?" I said, "No, actually, I haven't." He puts me into his helicopter. He's at the helm. We take off. We fly. We follow the whatever river that is in Sydney, and then we fly over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We were low enough over the Sydney Harbour Bridge that the people doing the Sydney Harbour Bridge climb were waving at us, right? And so we went over. We landed in his driveway on like a big wooden pad that was on wheels, and then he wheeled his helicopter into the garage. It was the most surreal thing. I'm watching we just landed in a driveway like we've just driven to work, right? And he's just wheeled his helicopter in his house. We then sat for, I don't know how long it was, maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half, in his incredibly beautiful home. He's got wonderful taste in architecture and home. And we talked about life, the universe, and everything. And then ultimately he said, "Oh, Topher, before you go, do you need a new camera?" I said, "Well, actually, I don't own a camera at the moment. I've been borrowing a camera every time I do a video. I'm borrowing cameras at this point." And he'd bought a camera to try and rig it to the bottom of his helicopter in the hope of getting helicopter footage. And then he'd realized that you couldn't just jerry rig some home sort of stuff. And so he had gone and bought a professional gimbal rig for the bottom of his helicopter, and he had this camera just sitting there, tripod and some other stuff. And he literally just brought it out to me, and he just handed it to me, and he said, "If you can make use of it, it's yours." Practically brand new. He'd tested it a couple of times. It was practically brand new. And knowing full well that I'd knocked him back, knowing full well that he and I were never going to see eye to eye on this issue, he still gave whatever he had to give. Yeah. And sent me on my way with his blessing. And we've spoken a few times on the phone since, and he's always been an absolute gentleman with me. So I just find it like So we've seen tonight against both yourself and myself, all of these accusations. Oh, grifter, just in it for the money, blah, blah, blah. And I just sit there and I'm like, you genuinely have no idea who you're talking to. Because in my case, you're talking to, I don't know, how many 30-year-olds have knocked back $1 million for the sake of their integrity because they weren't willing to become the face of a campaign they didn't believe in? It'd be a very short list. How many people have knocked back a Bentley Silver Spur? It would be a very short list, right? And yet here they are, determined to hate on us and determined to believe that we're the bad guys in all of this. I just find it such a fascinating psychological thing. And then they can't understand why we're so dismissive of them, right? I dismissed them because I sat there in Dick Smith's plane and knocked back $1 million. That's why I dismissed them.
Yeah, the story for me the last couple of years was Luke Sutton that owns Drifter. He actually wrote to Dick Smith. He won't mind me telling this story. When he started his business about 30 years ago, he was making flat pack camping kitchens out of plywood. Great innovation. And but he wrote to Dick Smith and said, look, I'm starting out in a new business. I'm a young guy. I'm building these things in my garage and I need a bit of help. And back in those days, $1,000 was a lot of money. Sure. And Dick sent him a check for $1,000. And he cherishes that. But, you know, that same man recently he's got a business where he employs over 100 people and he's a very successful manufacturer in the Hunter Valley. And his business was he received an offer of $15 million for a half share of his business from a large outdoor retailer. Let's put it that way, a chain.
Sure. Yep.
And it was a deal that would have made Luke for life. Absolutely. It would have solved all his problems. He could have had the best life with that. And the night before he was going to fly down to sign the deal, he looked at their Facebook page and they said that they said to any staff who hadn't been vaccinated in their Facebook page that they weren't going to be receiving their annual bonus. And Luke contacted the guy who was setting up the deal, the CEO of the company, and said, I've just read that you guys aren't going to pay bonuses to your staff who haven't been vaccinated. That's discrimination. And the guy said, well, yeah, that's right. That's what we've got to do. And we've decided to do. And he said, well, I don't have anything to do with you. The deal's off.
Yeah, wow.
That's a $15 million bounty on your integrity.
Yeah.
And that guy, Luke Sutton, and he hates being put under a spotlight, but that guy is the epitome of integrity in my book. And look, so is John Larder and so is Christian Mack. And nobody gets hammered more than Christian Mack does. And my faith in Christian Mack is marrow deep. And you can go on with the Freemason stuff and all the other stuff you go on about. Fill your boots. But I know when the chips are down, there are certain people I can count on. John Larder is one and Christian Mack is the other. Yeah. And that's where I am. Yeah, I may be naive and I may be wrong, but I don't care until I'm proven wrong. I'm standing on my belief.
Yeah. So this is the sort of stuff that I love. Okay, so No More Excuses has been banging on. He's one of the trolls here. And so as I was telling that story about Dick Smith goes and lies with lots and lots of exclamation marks. The thing is, I was there, right? Now I get you weren't there and the other people watching weren't there. Okay, people have to decide whether they believe me or not. But people assume that someone like me must be some sort of a narcissist or what have you because we're unaffected by people's, comments about us. People criticize us, people try to tear us down. No, I'm unaffected because I was there. I had the conversation. And so your comment calling me a liar has absolutely no effect on me because I know the truth. I was there, right? And this is why you can have this barrage of abuse and lies and all sorts of insults and so forth. I mean, look, you've actually copped it worse than I have tonight, Hoody. You've done well. I mean, there's some real kind of, I mean, these people presumably are progressives and they should have no problem with gay sex, but they certainly seem to be bringing it up quite a lot in relation to their opinion of you there, Hoody. Just an interesting little aside. It shouldn't be an insult in their book, but they're using it like it's an insult. I just find that curious. But so why does that have no effect? Well, because we know the truth. I know what I've done and who I am, and I'm very aware of my failings, and I'm very aware of what I've done to overcome those and the ones that I'm still working my way through. I'm very aware. So the opinions of someone who has no idea, well,
Well, not
Their
only no
action.
idea, but no identity. I mean, you don't see a picture and you don't see a real name. So,
For the most part, there are a few exceptions that are willing to put their name or their face to their insults, but for the most part, you're absolutely right.
yeah, and you know what? What if you're wrong about me? What if you're wrong about Topher?
Yeah.
What if you're wrong?
Yeah.
I mean that's if that's a risk you're prepared to take, that's fine. But is the world worse off because we're doing what we're doing, or is it might be better off, or is it just neutral?
Yeah.
Are we hurting you by what we're doing? We don't mean to. I don't mean to hurt you. And this is about Christmas and
Yeah.
yeah,
We've rabbit trailed well and truly.
we have, and but I'm going to say again to those who are saying those things, look me in the eye.
Yeah.
I don't much like your behaviour, but I love you.
Yeah.
Oh, that might make me homosexual. Yeah. I tell you what, grace and evil can't live in the same house, and evil's always the first to leave.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. And this is a really interesting thing
that was a lovely comment. Thank you. God bless you.
I'll bring that back up again. I probably didn't give that as much time as it deserved. Here we go, Carla.
Thank you, darling. You got no idea how that kind of comment really spurs us on. Topher gets them, I get them. God bless you. Your life's worth saving, Carla.
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%.
Bless you, darling.
100%. And Joyce here, Topher, leave them out. They're hilarious. It's talking about the trolls. I've never seen so many in one chat. It has been thick tonight. I'm like, obviously, I always assumed that these people were unemployed, but maybe I've judged them wrong. They must be on their Christmas break. That's why they're also available to be on the chat tonight. You two must be.
They might have had their 5th or 6th jab as well.
That's right. You two must be a real threat. They're on fire. They're absolutely going for it. Now, this is something. Look, it would be remiss of us not to talk about this. I'm sorry to have a bit of a downer, but this is a horrific crime that has been committed in Queensland recently and has been instantly turned into a political hot potato. I think in just total disrespect to the police officers and to the one civilian that were murdered. Obviously, 6 people died. 3 of them are the perpetrators, and 3 of them, 2 police officers and 1 neighbour, were just innocent victims in the whole thing. The world is worse off to 2 Queensland police officers, and I will add the neighbour as well, who won't be home for Christmas. 100%, 100%. And one of the fears that I've had since March 2020, when I began speaking out, was if there's a truism. This isn't something that I've said. There is a truism in all of human history. You can see it play out over and over again. If you stop people from being heard peacefully, you will cause a percentage of those people to take a different option.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't say that to justify it for a moment. There is nothing that can justify what they did. That is horrific. And I condemn it in no uncertain terms. And I know, Hoody and everyone else that I am personally networked within this movement condemns absolutely what was done to those police officers and to that innocent neighbor. There can be no doubt about that. But this has been my fear since the beginning, that by just running roughshod over everybody, when people are saying, hey, the government is becoming tyrannical, beating the shit out of them and shooting rubber bullets and bathing them in tear gas isn't exactly a good way to prove them wrong, is it?
No.
Right? You want to talk about an environment that creates radicalism. That's it. That's the environment that's going to create radicalism. That's not to justify it for a split second. But we have to be realistic about what's going through, what these people are using to justify their actions. And unfortunately, they had a lot of things to point at to justify their actions. Now, for my part, for Hoody's part, for the part of the vast majority of people, we have been calling for peace since the beginning. And I can show you from my live streams moments where people have engaged in violence against the police, and I've put my own body at risk to step in between and to intervene. Okay, I have that on camera twice, where people have gone to use violence against police officers, and I've put myself at risk to defuse that situation and to bring an end to that attempted violence, right? I've got the video evidence of that. I am as anti-violence as you can get. And what these people did in Queensland is not representative of our movement at all in any way, shape, or form. What's been really interesting to me is when you have individuals who kill in the name of Allah, in the name of various other ideologies and ideas, very quickly people jump in to say, look, they're not representative. They're not representative of Islam. They're not representative of this. They're not representative of that. In the case of these killings, people have been very quick to do the opposite and say, oh, well, these people are representative of all of this hate. All of these extremists, there are tens of thousands of these people all around Australia. And they've been very, very quick to try and go the other way with this. And I think it's a really despicable politicization of a tragedy when those officers and that neighbor hadn't even been buried. There were already journalists and politicians jumping into their graves to politicize and to use what those individuals did for political purposes.
The Australian newspaper needs to be wound up after that headline. That labelling all anti-vaxxers. For goodness sake, I mean, we wax lyrical about gender equality and anti-discrimination, and that was the big failing of Qantas. They had all these anti-discrimination policies and anti-bullying policies and all of that. And the biggest bully in the Qantas empire is the Qantas management. They have gone out and broken every law of fair play that they applied through all the training programs and the courses that we had to do every year to make sure that people weren't discriminated against. They were the biggest offender. The corporate body of Qantas is the biggest offender, and the media are playing that game something terrible. It's absolutely terrible what they're doing. It's reprehensible. Now, anyone who's watched us for the last 2 hours knows, Topher, that I believe in love and compassion. That's it. Yep. I believe in God. I live on a self-sufficient farm because I know I need to survive, from the point of view of I won't be able to afford to I've got to live cheaply and frugally. So we bought a cheap block of land in the country 10 years ago. We've turned it into a little food forest, and we've got chooks and all of that. It's a beautiful way to live. And I'm off the grid. And I also haven't been vaccinated. So according to the mainstream media, I love God, I'm off the grid, I haven't been vaccinated, and I'm self-sufficient. Therefore, I must be a domestic terrorist.
Yeah.
For goodness sake, you are just as much to blame, mainstream media, as in fact more so than anybody. Yeah. It's propaganda that has things like this happen. It's propaganda that breeds hate, where where there is no reason for fear. You create false evidence appearing real, fear, and then all you're doing is creating newsworthy events that you can capitalize on even more. You're a disgrace. You are a blight. You are a cancer on society. That's who you are. And any of these talking heads on mainstream media that are still playing this game need to really consider what they're doing. And we're doing everything we can in Club Grubbery to get the mainstream media. I'll tell you something really interesting happened, Topher. There was, we went to Nigel Farage. John Larder and I went to see Nigel Farage in Sydney.
In Sydney or Brizzy?
In Sydney.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting night. When Nigel Farage was over, we were approached by two gentlemen who were from the mainstream media. They were from one of the three commercial networks. One was a reporter. They weren't there in an official capacity. They were there to hear Nigel Farage, so they must be awake, because nobody goes to hear Nigel unless they're awake. And the other one was director of operations for this corporate TV channel. And they came up to us and they said, "Look, we really want to have a chat to you guys. We've been wanting to talk to you before you leave." And we said, "Yeah, sure." And we stayed with them till 1 o'clock in the morning, from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, 11 p.m. to 1. And we said, "Well, what's going on?" And they basically, the gist of their conversation was, "It's really interesting what's going on at the moment, because your following and viewership is going up while ours is going down."
Yep.
And they said there's now you've only got to look at the ratings of CNN, 500,000 viewers for CNN. That's an indicator.
I've had videos that individually exceed that, not consistently. I'm not saying that I'm bigger than CNN, but they must be absolutely shitting themselves if a nobody, and I will describe myself as a nobody, YouTube political commentator in Australia, a country with a small population and famously disinterested in politics, can have videos, individual videos, that have outdone them on a viewership basis. And there are people far bigger than me in Australia and elsewhere in the world. They would be feeling the heat for sure.
They really are. And so I said basically to the guy, well, the reason your viewership's going down is because people don't trust you. And he said, I get that. The other thing that came up, which was interesting, was I said to him, can you smell a rat in the cheese factory? And he said, I have for the last couple of years, and it's pretty obvious what's going on. And I said, well, why aren't you talking about it? He said, look, I'm this far up the ladder, and the decisions that are made to put real stories to air are from this far up the ladder.
Yep.
That's the problem we've got. So I said, well, there must be journalists out there who can smell a rat in the cheese factory, who are hanging for that big story, that big Pulitzer. They must be hanging for a Walkley to get this story out there, because it's begging to be told. It's the biggest, it's the biggest con job in history, and it's begging to be told.
Yeah.
He said they are. And I said, well, why don't they do this? He said, what's the point of them doing the story if we can't air it?
Yeah.
And I said, well, what about they do it and Johnny and I will air it? He said, he laughed and he said, what's the point of that? He said, the only people who watch you are people who are awake.
And people who already agree. That's right.
Who already agree. He said, the people who need to hear the story are the people who watch us, not you.
Yeah, that's right.
So he said, we've just got to bide our time. And I mean, I was heartened by the fact that he was talking to us at that level.
Yeah, that's actually amazing.
I won't mention the network, but it gave me great hope, because I think people are talking about what you're doing and maybe what we're doing as alternative media. I think we're a parallel media.
Yeah.
And I think there's a desperate need for a parallel or alternate media. I mean, Rukshan and Avi and those guys are doing great work.
Yep.
Joel does some great stuff. You know, Maria Z does some great stuff. There's some really brilliant people in Australia putting out some good stuff and good content. And we need to keep doing that, because believe me, I know the hours you put in are horrendous. I know the hours I put in. I mean, I go to sleep thinking about this. I wake up thinking about this. There is no relief from this. It is relentless. I want to catch a brim. I want to catch a flathead. I want to go back to a retirement life.
Yeah.
I can't afford to now. So
yeah.
If I wanted this much effort into some kind of corporate income, I'd be making a lot of money, believe me. I could go back to flying. I've been offered a job flying a jet for a lot more money than I was earning at Qantas.
Yeah.
But I can't leave this now because of people like some of the comments that there, you guys are doing what you're doing is keeping us alive. We can't walk away from that.
Correct.
And it's not because we're heroes and gurus and all that. It just means that if there's some method of us, see you, Peter. Thanks for watching, mate. If there's some mention, if there's some way that we can hold the door open for somebody for an extra day or an extra week or whatever, then we've all got an obligation to do that.
Yeah, correct. I mean, this has been it's the blessing and the curse. The most wonderful thing in my life, besides my own kids and my own wife. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did. Are these moments that I get with people where I get to see them face to face, and they tell me the impact that my work had on them. And it's just the most beautiful thing, because it's not something that most people ever get in their life.
Well, what Battleground Melbourne did. You gave the people who went through that a voice.
Yeah.
I didn't see any violence at any of the rallies I went to. None of them.
No.
I only saw love and I mean, Epic at Canberra was amazing. The people, the 95% of the people that were there, they were just totally blown away by the compassion they were sharing for each other.
Yeah.
But I never saw the violence. But you guys who went through Melbourne, that's why I went to the mission to Melbourne a couple of months ago with John.
Yep. I'm sorry I missed you there.
No, I ended up speaking at Flinders Street Station because the airline people were saying, you've come all this way, please speak for the industry. And I ended up doing that. But I said to Tammy look, John and I are going to come, but we just want to be with the people because we needed to be there. We couldn't get to Victoria because of the border closure.
Yeah, right.
What was going on, but we needed to be there to show some solidarity for what all of you guys went through. And so what you gave Victoria, you gave Australia a voice internationally with Battleground Melbourne. The people of the world needed to see what Melbourne was going through, and you did that beautifully. And I mean, if you weren't doing this, if you weren't filling this role now, as some people would be asking you not to because they don't like you, then that would have been missed. But
yep. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't miss what never gets made. You don't miss what you can't imagine. But look, from my perspective, I consider it a privilege to have done what I did. I really do. It's what a moment in history and what a place to find myself in. It was really brought home for me when we had the premiere of Battleground Melbourne in cinemas. So obviously it's available for free online, battlegroundmelbourne.com. You can watch it for free. But people wanted it in cinemas. And so we held this cinema premiere at the Rivoli Cinema in Melbourne. And the usual trolls and cranks tried to get it cancelled. They threatened to show up with a mob and cause violence. And village cinemas were a bit nervous for a little while. They were like, "Oh, maybe we have to cancel it." And I just went, look. I went through all the comments. I went, okay, so I know who this guy is. I can tell you about his background. I know who that guy. Because all the trolls, all the actual trolls, not like the lame ass ones on here. These guys are just all mouth, nothing else. But the ones that actually have any chance of ever getting physical, they've all got police records already. We know who they are. We've got restraining orders on various individuals. Like it's people don't realize it's actually not safe to do what I do down here in Victoria. I'm not sure how it is up in Queensland. But there are individuals who are known to target and violently attack people who do what I do. And we know who they are. So I went through the list of all the people who are agitating and saying, oh, we're going to show up, I'm going to cause a ruckus and people are going to get hurt and blah, blah, blah. And I went through and I went, okay, they're all air. There's no one of substance in that list. I can guarantee you no one's going to show up. And I said that to Village Cinemas beforehand. I said, not a single person, not one human being will actually show up in person. Not one. And Village added extra security and then said, okay, let's do it. We're going to go through with it regardless. And credit to them because no other company was willing to do it. And so I showed up. We had 488 seats in the cinema. A handful of people weren't able to come. That's normal with any live event. We had about 460 people in the room.
Wow.
And afterwards, I got to walk down the front. And when there were 460 faces looking this way, I got to be the one that was looking back at all of them. And that moment for me was so incredibly profound. And I felt so incredibly privileged. Like I've not done anything to deserve that. There is nothing about me or my life that means that I deserve that. But I got to stand there, and I've got to stand in another 24 cinemas since, with anywhere from 40 people to 150 people, all looking this way. Well, I get to be the one standing down the front looking the other way. And it's just the most phenomenal experience. And I just feel incredibly privileged. I feel incredibly unworthy. This is not a chore. I mean, it has its moments, don't get me wrong. It's a privilege to do what we do. It comes at a cost, but it's a privilege. And I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Yeah, I've seen that on the tour when we, like at Gympie, for example, we went to a little country hall about, 10K north of Gympie. Beautiful lady organised the event. We thought there'd be about 100 people there, and Michelle and I got there late, and the venue was already packed. There were about 400 there. And as I walked down the aisle to the stage, there was this standing ovation, and I got to stand and look back at the people, which we do at every event. It's an incredibly moving thing to do.
Yeah.
Even the Lord Mayor of Gympie was there himself. And then you realise when you look at those faces that that we have immense responsibility.
Yeah.
And our language needs to be measured and our emotions need to be measured because we could easily tilt people in the wrong direction. And I think we need to be very, very, very careful.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of responsibility.
It is, and I think it's the biggest responsibility I've ever had in my life.
Yeah,
To be honest with you, and
yeah.
I don't relish it. I really don't relish it. I'd love to
Let me
wind it
just
up for 2 years.
pause you here, Alistair. Do not get me started on box 4. Do not get me started on box 4. All I will say is everything that he has said since the release of the movie is a lie. I offered to credit him, and he did not want to be. He's the only person who held me over a barrel and demanded money for his footage. Do not get me started on box 4. That's all I'll say on that.
Oh, it's a lovely movement.
Look, no. He's not representative of the movement at all. He was just a guy with a camera. I have no respect and no time for him. I regret the fact that I actually bent over to his demands and actually gave him I gave him a little bit of money for his footage, and I regret that. I should have just said, fuck you, fuck off. I'm using it under fair use, and you have absolutely no rights. That's what I should have said to him. And I regret that I didn't. But because he's just gone on, he's come after all of that, and I gave him money. All he's done since is spread lies about me. Flat out lies about me. Right? I paid him money. I did what he wanted me to do in terms of the credits and so forth. I blurred out his logo in the version that's online. I did all the things he wanted me to do. Right. And then he came back and he just told lie after lie after lie about me. I've got no time for him at all. Absolutely done.
Yeah.
Anyway. Cool. So that's that. Let's deal with box 4 while we're there. All right. Look, Hoody, I know that you've got endless stamina. You know where this is going. So Hoody, when was our last slow chat? How long ago was that?
54 years, 11 months and 13 days.
Yeah, something like that. Look, it was months ago. It was sometime. It was. Look, it might not have even been this year. I should have looked it up. Might not have even been this year. Might have been last year. I'm not even sure. But a long time ago, a while ago, we did a slow chat, and the prediction was made that I would pike before Hoody did. That I would be like, you know what, I got to go to bed before Hoody was exhausted, and that prediction came true. And I think it was after only about 2 hours. That was a bad night for me. We've had slow chats go for 5 hours, but I only lasted about 2 hours, and I was like, I got to be out. I got to be, I got to go to bed. But I do have an excuse this time in the form of a 10-day-old baby, and a wife who needs me to help look after the baby and to be there when she's got to feed during the night and do all those sorts of things. But what would you like to see before we wrap up? What's your hope for 2023 for the people that you've now met in person, so many of them? And look, I applaud you for that road trip. That's a huge effort. That is a huge effort to do that, and I applaud you for that. But can you share with us what's your vision? What do you hope to see in Australia and in the lives of the people that you interact with so often online and in person in 2023?
I want to see us become. We talk about being multicultural. We talk about being an open-minded society, but we're not.
Yeah.
We've allowed ourselves to degenerate into not she'll be right, but I'll be right. We've allowed ourselves to sink into the mire of propaganda, fear. And I want us to think that if we had $1 for everything we worried about that never happened, we'd all be very, very wealthy people. But most of the things that we're afraid of have been generated by people so that we're going to be controlled.
Yeah.
And I think that Australia has the potential, slowly but surely, to find its strength in its people, to actually stand up and say no. They don't have to do anything else. You don't need a gun. You don't need a Molotov cocktail.
Yes, and please don't, like, oh, good Lord, do we even have to say it? Hurting people is a backward step. Whatever you think you're achieving, whatever movement you think you're a part, hurting people is a backward step. Don't hurt people. Number one, it's a sin, right? It's a sin. You are sinning against God. Number two, it's going to hurt the movement that you think you're helping or that you think you're a part of or whatever the fucked up stuff is going on here. You'll need Jesus if you're thinking about hurting people. Okay? That's all I'm going to say.
Look, it's so true. And I guess what I'm alluding to is there's an organization we set up a while back called Hoody's Heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an amazing group of people. They're everyday mums and dads who are just helping each other to get on.
Yeah.
To keep on keeping on. And people say, oh, it's egotistical to call them Hoody's Heroes. No, I'm not saying I'm the hero. I'm saying they are.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, that's right.
People we look up to are our heroes. And I look up to the people who are in those groups, that beautiful group. It's amazing to see them in action. A lot of them have got grey hair. They're not about violence. They're not about setting up militia groups. And they're not about, doing anything stupid. All they want to do is grow veggies together, to press the flesh with each other, to get out of their houses and commune, and just be real Australians. Just be real Australians. And I want for the whole country to be a massive Hoody's Heroes group, or a Topher field group, or a tribe, whatever.
I don't have one, so join Hoody's Heroes instead.
And I think if we do that, we can succeed greatly. Yeah. I think I'd like to see us all keep on keeping on. I'd like to see us all continuing to stand in our integrity, but most of all, just love the people that we disagree with and allow them to have their say, and not denigrate them if they've been vaccinated and you haven't. It doesn't none of this pure blood crap. Let's just keep everything real. And I reckon we can get our spirit back, but we desperately need to get it back. And I think 2023 will be a landmark year. I think there's going to be some tricky stuff happening. Let's not gild the lily. It's just incredible what's possible. Mm-hmm. But if we stick together in faith, we can get through this. We can get through this. So don't run down too many rabbit holes. Don't fight battles that you can't win. Just stick to the stuff that we can get through. Let's get things happening. Like, we desperately need a Royal Commission. Yeah, look, Royal Commissions often take years, and they cost lots of money, and nothing happens. And I think a Royal Commission is going to be largely a waste of time, except for one thing. The people in the bureaucracies of this country know that when the pressure's put on in a Royal Commission, that the upper level management of these bureaucracies always come out clean, and they throw the people like the underlings under the bus.
Correct.
It's the Secretary of Health that's going to cop it. And when those people know how this game is played, and they know that that's going to happen when there's a Royal Commission, they leak like sieves.
Yeah.
Any opportunity we get for more truth to come out is better than none at all. A Royal Commission is not the best answer we've got, but it's a good start. And so let's work together in peace and harmony to achieve that.
Yeah.
Let's stop throwing each other under the bus. Let's give freedom a real chance. And let's get on with the job of being Australian.
Yeah. Melissa's spot on here. A Royal Commission depends on the terms of reference, the scope for the inquiry, and I would add to that, the individual put in charge. Right, you know straight away when you see a Royal Commission being set up, you know straight away whether it's a legitimate Royal Commission where they're trying to find the truth, or whether it's a stitch-up based on the terms of reference and the person they put in charge. And so we would need to watch that very, very closely as and when a Royal Commission does get set up. But look, we need to see a Royal Commission, but we need to see a good one. We need to see one that's actually interested in understanding what's going on. In the meantime, I'm very grateful for the small number of senators that we have in the federal parliament that are actually going into bat for us. We've got Jared Rennick. You've got Alex Antic. We have the newly elected UAP senator in Victoria. What is his name?
Babbitt,
thank you. Alec, not Alex. Oh, goodness. Why can't I remember? I shook hands with him a couple of weeks ago. Crikey. Someone put his name in. Yeah, Babbitt. Someone put his first name in there because I can't think of his first name.
For a newborn baby, you're excused.
Okay, yeah, I know. I'm so tired. I'm sorry. I really am. And at a state level, we've got David Limbrick here in Victoria. Ralph Babbitt. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, a couple of others.
And you
We've
got
got
Ricky
Malcolm
Lee,
Roberts.
Ricky Lee,
Sorry?
and Ricky
We
Lee.
got Ricky Lee Tyrrell. Ricky Lee Tyrrell. Now, I'm looking forward to that. I've known Ricky Lee for a number of years now through my work on irrigation water issues, and she's a firecracker. She does not back down. She doesn't know how to.
If you want to see statesmen at work, look at the interview we did last week with Jared Rennick and Alex Antic. We did a club grubbery with them, and they are real statesmen. To me, a statesman is somebody who puts everything at risk for integrity. And these men have done that. I mean, they are risking pre-selection issues and all that, but they're standing there. And, you know, Malcolm Roberts is a standout statesman as well.
Correct.
What I'm enjoying about these guys when they all get together, and Babbitt and to some level, Nick Canavan and
yeah, he's touch and go, but he's got some really good stuff. Yeah.
So I'm loving the bipartisanship. I think that we haven't seen that in Australia for a long time. Michelle's turning the lights on me. That doesn't mean that I'm caving in and giving you the win.
I can't scratch this up as a win to me. No,
no way, mate. I'm staying. You've got a baby to get up and feed.
I do, but I want to say this. I did a slow chat with Senator Jared Rennick. I don't know, 2 months ago, something like that. Sorry,
how good's he?
I have, and I mean this in all sincerity. There is nothing ironic about what I'm about to say. I mean this. He is a next level human being.
Yeah,
I have never spoken with someone and felt like I was literally in the room, in the presence of someone genuinely special.
Yeah.
Right. You know, you look at most people and you're like, okay, you're fantastic. You know your stuff. You're all over your profession, blah, blah, blah. But if I worked really hard and I've been in your profession for as long as you have, I can see how that could happen. Right. You know, with most people, that's how it works. You know, we want their expertise, but their expertise is kind of attainable. You can kind of look at it and go, well, that makes sense. With Senator Rennick, I was jumping and I gave him no notice at all as to what topics I was going to cover. I don't do that with slow chats, right? Because I don't know what topics I'm going to cover. We jumped from topic to topic to topic, and every single time, every single topic I jumped to, he was there with me. He had data and facts available just off the top of his head. He understood each and every topic that I was talking about. I've never, I got to the end of that interview and I just, we you know, the broadcast finished and then we said our goodbyes afterwards. I turned off the browser and I just sat there and I went, what was that? That was actual like next level human being. He has a level of intellectual capacity that I could not have even if I worked at it for decades. Like this wasn't just expertise. He has a capacity that I don't have.
I would love to live in Australia with Alex Antic as Prime Minister.
Phenomenal.
And Rennick as Treasurer. I would love to live in Australia under those two gents.
Yep. I just came away.
Yeah.
Genuinely, it genuinely changed my paradigm of what's possible for a human mind. Now, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I've interviewed a lot of people who you would consider to be high achievers in whatever field they're in. He shifted my paradigm of what's possible for a human being. Senator Jared Rennick is on another level. I'm sorry, he just is. He just is.
And you know what I love about him? I can send him a text and he will respond within an hour. You know,
wow.
I've had him on a couple of times. I've asked him to come on a few Zooms and things like that. Always yes. He'll always juggle things. And Alex Antic's the same. They make themselves available. Malcolm Roberts is the same. Yep. I've got a lot of respect for Malcolm Roberts.
Oh. Have I told you my Malcolm Roberts story?
No.
Okay. So I spent 3 days in a plane with Malcolm Roberts. We were in a little 6-seater twin-engine turboprop plane flying all over the Murray-Darling Basin. Malcolm Roberts has taken a personal interest in the Murray-Darling Basin, the use of water, etc., which has been my main topic. I started in 2009. And over the journey, this has been my main topic: is the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and the misuse of water in the Murray-Darling Basin.
So, in other words, saying your big interest is corruption.
Well, yeah, I mean, fundamentally, that's what it is. It is corruption, absolutely. But Senator Malcolm Roberts, even though he's a Queensland senator, he recognised that what was happening with water south of him was affecting what was happening for his constituents, and he took a personal interest in it. And he sat there. No, a couple of data points. Himself and his PA, Richard, who is also exceptional, voluntarily sat at the very back of the plane. Now, I don't know if you've been in a small plane, 6-seater little turboprop. They're not very comfortable places to be. I had a camera. I was trying to get footage as we were flying, etc. And so I was just automatically given the front seat, right? I got the front seat with the extra leg room and the better view. And Senator Malcolm Roberts, as an Australian senator, voluntarily said, no, I'm going all the way to the back. And Richard, his PA, went with him. And we had a couple of other advisors that were with us, and they sat in the seats in between. We landed, I can't remember, we landed a dozen or more times over those 3 days in different remote communities. And each time there were people who'd been organized to come and meet us at the airport or at some local place where we would have a beer or have a meal and talk. And Senator Roberts, I watched him time and time again in intense conversation. The level of presence, he was there in the room with them. He wasn't in his head off thinking about anything else. He was present and focused. And it didn't matter if this was an Aboriginal elder who was difficult to understand, or a farmer who was also difficult to understand, some of them, or he didn't, or a mayor or whoever. It didn't make a difference. He sat there and he gave them 100% of his focus, and he listened to them. And Richard, the whole time, is there taking notes. And along the way, Senator Malcolm Roberts would be there. Okay, note this. Yeah, make sure you get that. Did you get that? Yeah, you got that. Good. Okay. And they're working together on these notes. And then we would get to some shitty motel. We would have landed in some, inland New South Wales town, middle of nowhere. There's some single-story motel that hasn't been renovated in 50 years. And Senator Roberts is sharing a room with his PA, Richard. They've got like separate beds in this rundown room, and they would go in there and they would be, and I know this because the blinds would be open, they'd be sitting there going back through their notes from the day before they went to bed. Right. And they're looking at all the notes from the conversations, this and this and this and this. And then what brought it all together for me was on day 3, we took off again, having just been on the ground, having a conversation with some locals there. And they were telling us about the issues that they were facing. And we took off, and on the headset, we're all wearing headsets with microphones. And on the headset, Senator Roberts comes on and he says, Topher, because I was one of the advisors, I was one of the subject matter experts that was there, as a reference point for Senator Roberts. He says, Topher, that guy that we were just talking to, he said this thing, and I won't go into the details of what he said this thing. Isn't that the inverse view of what was said by this other person further downstream that we spoke to on day 1? Like, isn't what he's talking about the thing that's actually causing this other issue downstream? And I'm like, yes, spot on. You're exactly spot on. And he'd been taking such thorough notes and cross-checking and referencing those in such detail with his PA, Richard, that he just took off from the ground and went, that conversation from 3 days ago, which for him, by the way, just to give you a reference, that was probably 50 conversations ago, right? It was an intense 3 days. He'd probably had 50 conversations since then, and he put the pieces together and he just said, yep, this is what's going on, right? And I just went, I wouldn't put him in the same category as Senator Jared Rennick, but what I would say is by sheer work ethic and by sheer force of will, by choosing every day to get up and do the work, he is an exceptional human being just by sheer work ethic.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more. I was in a tricky situation with Malcolm Roberts in Canberra that was very interesting. I won't go into it, but we looked at each other and we needed to rely on each other for a while there, and it was a pleasure to be in the trench with him.
Yep. No, I agree. We're very lucky to have the few good ones that we have, and we need to get behind them. We need to support them. I get bemused even now in the comments. People are like, "Oh, can you see how he's just a shill for the establishment?" Blah blah blah. I'm like, guys, if you can't accept the idea that maybe 1 or 2 good senators have slipped through, then whatever. Okay, fine. Go have your fun believing that we're never going to achieve anything. We're never even going to get a good senator elected. If that's what you need to believe, you go to bed and you sleep on that. That's cool. So from my perspective, 2023, because that in theory is what we were talking about. We ended up obviously rabbit holing a lot from there. 2023. My hope for 2022 was that was going to be the year that we got on the front foot. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to shy away from it, I'm not going to hide from it. We didn't achieve what I'd hoped we would achieve in 2022. We didn't. I really hoped that we would achieve the ousting of Daniel Andrews out of Victoria. I really hoped that my fellow Victorians were going to do that. And it's very clear, obviously, that didn't happen. People say, oh, but it was election fraud. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. I know that it's comforting to believe that it was election fraud. It's way worse than that. It's way worse than election fraud. This is what the Victorian people want. That's the terrifying reality of this.
That's scary. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the situation that we're in now in 2023, where we clearly have not cut through. Our messaging, the rallies, all of that hasn't cut through. We haven't connected with the ordinary, average, everyday Australian, Victorian, Queenslander, New South Welshman. We haven't. And it is bad for us to pretend otherwise. It's bad for us to say, oh, we connected with them, but it was fraud. No, that means we never fix the real problem. The real problem, as I see it, is this. We are offering people something that they believe incorrectly, but they believe they already have. We're saying we are standing for freedom and human rights. And they go, freedom and human rights, oh, but we're Australian, we already have those. And they don't actually understand the reality of what's happened right in front of their eyes over the last number of years. That's the challenge that we face in current years. That's the challenge that we have to overcome, is how do we actually communicate with these people in a way that connects with them and has them actually go, hang on, maybe there is a problem here.
We've got to drop the word freedom.
I agree.
Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, the song says. If you were to ask 300 people in a room to write down their definition of freedom, you get 300 different answers, and they'd all be different, and they'd all be correct.
Sure.
When we were marching through, I think it was Bunbury, in a protest when we were over in WA, and somebody came up and said, what are you guys marching for? And I think the answer was freedom. And they said, you've already got it. You're marching. Nobody's stopping you from marching. We're sitting in a cafe having a feed. What are you on about? And if people say to me, what are you doing? I say, well, I don't want the borders closed. I don't want mandates, but I'm over government overreach. I'm sick and tired of government overreach, everything that's being done for our so-called safety. For example, you can say to somebody, do you own a property? Yeah, I'm buying a house. Okay. Do you like the idea that you need to apply in triplicate and wait for 6 months for the council to approve you putting a 6x4 garden shed in your backyard? Are you sick and tired of driving down the highway and seeing speed cameras and stoplight cameras and seatbelt cameras and mobile phone cameras? Are you sick and tired of the government telling you what to do? Are you sick and tired of the fact that you've got to increase the size of the house you're renting to accommodate all the bureaucrats that are there to make sure you do what you have to do? That's something that most people can relate to. And when the COVID thing's fizzled out, which it will do soon, it's going to be replaced by central bank, digital currency, social credit system, climate change.
Yep.
Those things are going to wake up people who were asleep through COVID. That's going to wake them up. So I think we have to change the narrative completely. I think using the word freedom is just, it's not definitive enough, because what got most of the people to the rallies was the things I talked about earlier. They wanted the borders open. The specifics. Yeah. But when they came up against all the other people, the Make America Great Again and the QAnon and all the other stuff that was there, scared the daylights out of them.
Could those people please shut up? Donald Trump is not playing 5D chess. The white hats are not coming to save you. Can we just put it to bed? Here's the bad news. If we're going to get saved, it's going to be us, right? People want to believe that Donald Trump is going to save them. They want to believe the White Hats are going to save them. They want to believe the QAnon are going to save them. They're not. If there is a salvation coming, it's people like you and people like me working together and doing the hard work ourselves. That's where it comes from.
And then Jesus comes.
Correct. In the eternal context, in the salvation context, 100%. But stop looking to these unverifiable, mythological movements like QAnon and Trump's 5D supposed chess. They're not coming to save you. That's the truth.
Look, it'd be lovely if they did, but
not.
But what are you going to do while you're waiting? You know, the comments being made. You know, get the popcorn ready and all that sort of stuff. Well, the popcorn's gone cold and stale, and it's got mold on it. You can't just sit there with the popcorn in your lap. You've actually got to do things for yourself. Yep. So I think rather than being, I made a decision about 3 months ago, and I made it public that I was stepping out of the freedom movement. I'm out of the freedom movement.
Yep.
Am I giving up the fight? No. I'm going to be a member of a non-compliant community of resistance, non-violent resistance. And the best way to do that, is to ask questions. When you're being told to do something, ask why. You know, that's the best way to start that journey. Yep. And so that's my plan, is to do that. I'm going to be non-compliant unless I get a satisfactory answer in the way that I live my life. I'm going to be continually pushing the boundary and asking questions.
Yeah, opting out.
That's exactly it. Because the only silly question is the one we don't ask, and a lot of us have been very silly. We haven't asked questions, and we've let it go for too long. And so that's my approach from here on in. I am out of the freedom movement. I'm out of it, but I'm not out of the fight. Okay.
Yep. 100%.
The freedom movement isn't free. You know, you unless you speak against this person or that person, we're gonna trash you and all that. That's coercion. That's what we're fighting against.
Yeah. No.
So enough of that already. Let's be. You know what? Left wing, right wing. I don't care. Topher, I've never flown an aeroplane that didn't fly well unless it had both. The left wing and the right wing. And where do the people sit? In the middle between the two? And that's where most of Australia sits. Left wing, right wing, who cares? They just want to be represented.
I saw some troll comments earlier saying, it's only right wingers showing up to the protests. I'm like, you clearly have never attended a protest, right? Because I would talk to a lot of people over the course of any given protest. You can watch my live streams. I have little chit chats here and there all the way through. I'm talking to people before I go live. I'm talking to people after I go live. And one of the things that really struck me, and in the end, actually, it was quite interesting because I think they would almost seek me out to talk to me, was the number of ex-Greens voters and the number of self-identified left-wing voters that were there in the protests. And they were there because once upon a time, the Greens stood for human rights. Once upon a time, the Greens would have been up in arms about mandatory medication. They would have been furious. They would have been the ones leading the protests once upon a time. And for some of them, they remember that. And they look back and go, what happened to that?
Well, now you have Sarah Hanson Young laughing at Jared Rennick when he talks about the vaccine injured.
Correct. Actually mocking people that have suffered, in some cases, permanent life-changing injuries.
She who is perpetually offended.
Yeah. And this is from the same party that once upon a time, you know, if John Howard in 2000 and whatever had have said we're going to mandate this vaccination that everyone has to have, the Greens would have led the charge against it. And here's the thing. There are a lot of Greens supporters who remember that and who still believe in that. And the party changed underneath them. And now they're sitting there going, you know, to echo the words of which US president was it? The one who said, tear down this wall. Reagan, Ronald Reagan. In the words of Ronald Reagan, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. The Greens have left these people. They've left them homeless. And I saw this a lot when I was in Tassie, when I was campaigning for the Senate in Tassie. Obviously not enough to actually change the result. I didn't get elected. But I came across a lot of these people that were sitting there saying, we are dyed-in-the-wool Greens. You know, I was a Green from 1992, from year one, from when the Greens formed. I was a Green, and I was there, and I've been there for 30 years. And now they don't represent me anymore. I don't recognize them anymore. And those people were very sympathetic to my message of freedom. They were the ones who actually understood the word, ironically. They were the ones that understood the word. And so many other people, you're absolutely right what you said before. We need to retire the word freedom because the number of people that really understand it is just far too few. There's not enough. What we're doing is we're selling a solution to a problem that most people don't know they have.
Yeah.
They don't know they've lost their freedom. So we say, we're here, we're all about giving you back your freedom. Okay, cool, I'm good, I've got it already. And that's as far as the conversation goes.
Yeah.
So my commitment, and I've said this in the slow chat previously, but my commitment for next year is actually to get back to basics and to talk about what freedom is, to talk about what human rights are, from the most basic level, and then stepping forward from there into increasingly sophisticated levels of understanding of human rights and freedom.
Education.
So that you could take a 12-year-old and put them onto the first videos, and they'll be basic enough that they understand them. And by the time they're a 20-year-old, they'll be able to understand the last ones as well. And they'll have a thorough grounding on what freedom is, on what human rights are. And that's, to me, I mean, this is what our education system should have been doing, but it just hasn't. We've been let down so much by the people that were supposed to be the ones that educated us.
Yeah, and all that leads to truth. And I think 2023 is going to be the year of great truth. I think we're starting to see more and more of that come out from more and more sources that are surprising us. And you cannot hide a lie this big.
Not for long. For a little while you can, but not for long.
You can. So I think all this augurs well for next year. Give a plug for homeschooling. Absolutely. Michelangelo. Absolutely. Homeschooling.
Yeah, Angelica, yeah. Yep.
Look,
I was homeschooled. I was homeschooled as a kid. I'm homeschooling my kids. I wouldn't do it any other way.
Look, we can't trust the education system anymore. It's just an indoctrination.
No.
Yeah, Menzies will be turning in his grave. Yeah, I mean, well, this is so true. Yeah, we know all these things. We know that we've lost faith in all the institutions that we once held dear. Corporate churches, corporate charities, they've let us down. Look at where's all the money gone from the bushfire relief appeals?
And go back before then. The Black Saturday bushfire ripped through areas north and east of Melbourne.
King Lake and that area. Yeah.
King Lake. I was in King Lake that day. I left King Lake as best as I can figure about a half an hour before the fires arrived. I didn't know, of course. Yeah, I didn't know what was coming, of course. But I did a track day at Broadford, came home via King Lake, and then down through research and so forth. I actually looked at doing a documentary about King Lake because some of the locals up there who knew my work, they got in touch with me and they said, Topher, do you realize what's happening up here? And I said, well, no, obviously you had the bushfire. It's devastating, but you're rebuilding. You got insurance money. You got all that. They said, no. They brought in new codes. They've blanket overlaid the whole area with this new building code that requires us to build to this extraordinarily high bushfire proof standard, which means that even those of us that did have insurance, that insurance doesn't cover the cost of rebuilding because we have to use windows and doors and materials and stuff that is extraordinarily expensive compared to regular building materials. We can't just build a house like everybody else does anymore.
That's what I mean about government overreach.
Mm-hmm. So what happens is they end up living in their caravans on their property. This is their land. The house is destroyed. Their only option the only thing they can do with the insurance money is buy a caravan. So they end up on the caravans. Now, I interviewed a bunch of people and I was out of my depth. That's the honest answer. I was out of my depth. I was dealing with people who were suicidal. I was dealing with people who were hurting in ways I just couldn't this is what now. This is over 10 years ago. I couldn't deal with what they were dealing with, and I didn't know how to deal. I didn't know how to do a video on it that was going to be in any way respectful in any way. I just didn't know what to do with it, so I never did anything. But I've spoken to a few of those same people in the last year or so, and found out that what's happening now is the council up around Kinglake is trying to push people off their properties if they only have caravans, and saying, no, you can't live in a caravan anymore. You have to build a house. So what's happening now is they lived there. They bought the house. The house was destroyed by Black Saturday. And then even though they were insured, they couldn't rebuild because of rules the council made. And now the council is saying you can't live there on a caravan, even though the council is the reason they are living there on a caravan. And they can't sell the land because the cost of building a house is so high that the land is near worthless. No one wants to buy the land. So their entire financial future has been destroyed. Not by the bushfires. This is the thing. Not by the bushfires. By the bureaucratic response to the bushfires and the rules around what they're allowed to rebuild. Destroyed.
That's what I mean when we say if we stop talking about freedom and talk about things like that, most people can relate to that. And that gives us a perfect foundation to go to rallies and say that we've had enough as a country. We need... we do have some sovereignty. You know, when I was born in Australia, I was born a free boy.
Yeah.
That's all gone. I don't feel free. But I don't feel free from government and corporate overreach. No.
I talk about the 1980s. You know, I was born in 1982. I remember the late 80s and the 90s. I remember the 90s well. They were good times compared to now. But I talk to people a little bit older than me, another generation older, and they talk about the 70s and the late 60s. Yeah. That it was even freer again. It was just, you know, an even better place. And then I look at my son, and this was the funny thing. Like, I became a parent 6.5 years ago. And I didn't have that Hollywood moment of like that epiphany, that you know, light shining through and the angels going, ah! I didn't sort of have that moment, right, where my whole life changed. But over about 6 months, I then looked back and I realized my whole perspective had changed. And I was no longer thinking about 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future. I was looking at my son and I was thinking about 50 years in the future. Yeah. And from that point of view, from that perspective, on that timeline, the decisions that we're making now actually become more important, not less. When you look at what we're doing and the way life has changed from the 1980s to the 1990s to the 2000s to the 2010s to the COVID era, and you have a look at that trajectory that we're on, and you extrapolate that out another 50 years to when my son is only 15 years older than I am now, that starts to get scary. I'm not happy with what I see.
Things move very quickly. I mean, I was at the Qantas Founders Museum doing one of the town hall speeches there in Longreach. And I had the pleasure of going up and hugging an aeroplane that I actually flew, an old DC-3.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful old aeroplane, a World War II aircraft. It was actually designed and built in the 30s.
Yeah.
And parked behind it was a 747-200.
Oh, wow.
I filmed a video in the cockpit of that where I said goodbye to the flight deck, and
yeah, wow,
pretty poignant moment. But the time span between the old DC-3 that carried 20 odd passengers that I flew to the 747-200 was 38 years.
Wow.
38
years.
Yeah.
That puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Things happen very quickly, and we've got to be, and I've been saying at every town hall meeting on the tour that our future is in the rear vision mirror. We've got to go back to our future. We've got to go back to where things worked a lot better and stop thinking and stop fooling ourselves that all this technology and all this IT and all this AI is improving our lives. It's not. And, you know, the music in my era is always better than the music of the era of today, but we're talking about life here. We've got to go back We're going to go back to the future and say, righto, let's go back there and redraw this whole thing.
All right. Let me push back on you a little bit here. Let me push back on you a little bit. Technology itself is not the problem. AI itself is agnostic. It can be used for incredible good. It can also be used for incredible evil. QR codes. People are allergic in Victoria to QR codes, right? Because QR codes were a part of the whole check-in regime with COVID. There's nothing wrong with QR codes. They're just a barcode in 2 dimensions instead of 1. That's all they are. They're an agnostic technology. How they were used was wrong. I'm not afraid of AI, right? Throughout history, since the Industrial Revolution and the discovery of steam as an engine, as a means of doing work, we've had people warning against technology. We've had people saying, but it's going to take away all the jobs. And of course, it hasn't. What's happened in reality is we've all gotten richer, because the more you can have a machine doing work, on average, productivity goes up. And when productivity goes up, we all get richer. I'm not going to drill down into the economics of that and the reason why that works. I'm doing that in a book that I'm working on called Good People Break Bad Laws. That'll all be there. But fundamentally, the more work we can have done by non-humans, the richer humans become. That's the equation, right? The more work that was done by steam engines, making cloth, producing electricity, doing other work, the more wealthy humans become. And AI is another tool towards the same end. The problem is that we have individuals who are using that tool to enhance their own personal power.
Yeah.
That's the problem. The problem is not the technology. The problem is the human. It's the human heart and the human spirit.
Yep.
That's always been the problem, and that's the problem now with that technology.
We're going to get religious again if you're not careful.
No, go for it. Please do.
Well, once again, we've just got to go back to the heart of Christ, which would prevent anything like that being used for evil.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the big battle between. It's a great controversy between Satan and Jesus. It's the big battle between good and evil, and we've just got to see that for what it is and play that out for what it is. It's like,
well, this is it, right?
Thing is, it's not guns that kill people; it's people who kill people.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah, and Daniel's got it right here. AI, artificial intelligence, is a fantastic servant, but a terrible master. And the problem is, it's going to be both. Right? We are going to have the opportunity to use AI in our own lives. And trust me when I say this, because it's going to sound outlandish, but in 20 or 30 years' time, AI augmented technology is going to be as normal as a washing machine is today. I'm sorry, it's true, right? Every home has a washing machine. The vast majority of homes have a dishwasher. These are normal appliances that we assume will be in any home that we buy, any home that we rent. AI is going to be the same. It's going to be ubiquitous. Whether you like it or not, that's just what's going to happen. You know why? Because the power of AI is going to make the human experience better. We are actually going to benefit greatly from the existence of AI. But just like the cameras in our phones make our lives better, I can take photos of my family. I have a camera with me all the time. And you know what? The camera's not bad. I showed you some photos at the very start of this chat. Some photos of my kids. Every single one of those photos was taken on this camera right here, right? That's been a benefit to me. But these cameras are also used to monitor me. Speed cameras, red light cameras, traffic cameras, pedestrian cameras, blah, blah, blah. They're used to oppress as well as to benefit. The same is going to be true of AI. You are going to benefit from AI. You are also going to find that AI is used against you. The next front in the conflict between governments that want total control and people that want freedom is going to be AI. Arguing that AI itself is the enemy is misguided.
That's very true.
It's the use of AI in the hands of governments that want total power that is misguided. And we need to direct our energies and our arguments towards the actual enemy. Very
well put. That was a very good pushback, Topher, for someone at this hour of the night.
For a sleep-deprived person.
I concede to that. But I still want to go back to the 60s.
Look, I don't blame you. It was a simpler time when you could have some biff on the footy on the AFL or VFL as it was back in the 60s. You could have there's some biff on the, oh, not that you care. Where were you back in the 60s? What state were you in? Queensland, New South Wales?
I was in a state of euphoria. 60s. I think I was in New South Wales. Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't care about VFL back then. VFL was just some weird ass sport played south of the border down in Mexico. All right. Well, for me, I remember VFL vaguely, very early in my life. I remember VFL before it became AFL. But I remember back when they had mullets and they could biff each other. They could hip and shoulder and actually like really do damage to each other. And then afterwards, they'd have a fist fight. And then after the game, they'd have a couple of beers together and it would all be good. The good old days. I do have vague memories of what that was like. But unfortunately, I think those are long gone. What we have to do is to decide what our Christmas and what our New Year is going to be like. And I want to come back to this. And I'm going to wind up because we're heading towards 3 hours and 45 minutes. And I'm done. You've beaten me again.
Mullets went around in the 60s, Topher.
Well, they went around in the 60s. That's true. But I was born in 1982. So, they were around by then. I'm going to say, well done. You've beaten me again. I'm going to concede defeat. You've beaten me again. But can I just say, you have much darker bags under your eyes than what you did last time. I've pushed you far harder than I did last interview.
But I had those bags under my eyes when you press record or when you press whatever it is you press to start this thing.
True. And look, at your age, you've probably had them for 20 years. No offense. But nevertheless, I think I've pushed you far harder than I did. I've pushed you for an hour and 45 minutes longer than I did last time. But I want to bring it back to Christmas and I want to bring it back to this time of year and really focusing on being the kind of person and being the kind of family member that others can talk to. This is to come back to all the way back to what I started with. You've said everything to your family members already. If something that you were going to say was going to change their mind, it would have already happened. So it's not. You're not going to change their mind. That new study, the new piece of information, the new video, none of it's going to work. Just accept it. And instead of focusing on what you're going to say, focus on who you're going to be. And be that family member, that friend, that person in their life that they know they can come and talk to when the chips are down, when shit goes wrong, when they have an adverse reaction or someone they love has an adverse reaction, because that's what I've seen happen in my own family in just the last couple of weeks, right? It happens. Can you be that person that they know they can come and talk to and they're not going to get a lecture? They're not going to get an I told you so. They're just going to get love and acceptance. And the first words out of your mouth are going to be, are you okay? Just like the story that Hoody told us before with his beautiful wife. Are you okay?
Yep.
Because if that's not your number one concern, then what are you concerned about? What's your agenda if you're not actually concerned about them? Graham, I want to give you the last word. We're at 3 hours and 47 minutes. I'm done. I'm out. I've turned into a pumpkin already. But Graham, would you give us some last words for Christmas 2022, please?
I just want to pray.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm on board 100%.
I want to pray with my eyes open.
Yep.
Dear Lord Father in heaven, please grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference and also the right way. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, and not as I would have it, and trusting that you, Lord, will make all things right if I just surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next, is our prayer in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Look, I can't think of a better way to finish than that. Thank you to the 521 people that are still watching here at
You're
10 minutes
kidding.
of midnight. Yeah, it's 521
alive.
people. Yep, still watching across all the different platforms. The number that you're seeing, if you're watching, the number that you're seeing will be different. But the number that I see is all the platforms added together. 519 now. 2 people left us. But look, thank you so much for joining us and for watching. Graham, thank you so much. You are a generous man with your time, and you've been generous to me once again. I'm deeply grateful. Have an amazing Christmas. My prayer for you, Graham, and for each and every person watching is that the reality of Jesus Christ would be revealed to you afresh, a new revelation of who Jesus was and is would be yours in this Christmas and in this New Year's season. I'm going to go quiet for another 10 days or so until it's the new year, and then I'll pop back up again, and we've got massive things planned in the new year. But right now, that's not the point, because I'm not the point, and Graham's not the point. Jesus is the point. Jesus is the reason for the season. And I pray that you have a fresh revelation of just how important he is to human history and to your life personally right now today. That's my prayer for you. And I look forward to seeing you in the new year when you've had that revelation. We'll talk then.
Great being in the trenches with you, mate.